live.
Good evening. Welcome to the May 28th remote school committee meeting. I'd just like to quickly call to order Aaron Gaffin.
Here.
Carla Nazaro.
Here.
John Parks.
Here.
Tom Wise.
Here.
Sean Brandt.
Here.
And Chuck Robinson is here. Joining us from central office is John Doherty, Jennifer Stiles, Chris Kelly, Jen Allard, and Gail Dowd. And we also have Linda Engelson keeping the record of the meeting. And so tonight's agenda, we ran into. I apologize for running into some clock issues last meeting. We will get to the public comment at the end of the meeting. We'll read through the emails that we get, and again, that email address is D as in David, G as in Gary, School Committee at reading.k12.ma.us. You can use the same email address if you have questions during agenda items tonight. The way we'll proceed tonight is we'll have our consent agenda reports. We will then have we're very happy to have a presentation from the CPAC and one of their board members, Maria Morgan. Following that, we'll have a personnel update, a financial update, and we'll vote on the. Actually, we'll have some transfers to vote on under the financial update. We'll vote on a new transportation contract. We'll discuss, last summer we discussed setting up a retreat to discuss goals. So I'd like to start that conversation in terms of just kind of setting up the format and when we think we want to do that. I would prefer to do that in person, but when we get to that discussion, we can talk about that. And then we will pick up the social media policy and discussion, which we didn't get to last meeting. And again, we will make sure that there is time for the public input at the end of the meeting. Having said that, do we have a motion? Actually, first, is there anything anybody would like to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, can I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second, Carla.
Seconded by Carla, and this again the roll call vote. Carla?
Yes. Aye.
Aaron?
I actually had a comment for the minutes. Is this where I would say that? Sure, go ahead. Sorry. I think it should be reflected in the minutes that we ran out of time because we were up against the clock for teams. Rather than just like we didn't get to public comment things, I think we need to spell out what happened. Okay. Linda, I can. Will the committee accept that as a friendly amendment? Yes. I will, Aaron. I will get something to Linda as you know, a paragraph about that. Thank you. Okay. And we'll get that in the record. Do you want to read that motion? Did you just read the motion? I'm sorry.
I'll amend the motion.
Carla seconded.
Carla seconded.
Is
But I'll
there,
amend it so that Carla can vote
Yep.
again with the amended. Motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
second? Okay, roll call vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Carla,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Thank you. We will now have reports. So we'll go right, we don't have a student tonight, so we'll go right to staff reports. And I'm just looking to my right down the end of the table and I see Jen Stiles.
Thank you. I actually prefer to go right after Maura Drummy. Hers is always so informative. So
Yes.
I'm definitely missing her tonight. Honestly, we have continued to do so much work in terms of partnering and working with our building leaders, teachers, paras, and related service providers to make sure that the students and families are getting what they need. As we are working with our CPAC and waiting for information from the state regarding what will happen for extended year services. We are anticipating that we will have that information next week sometime, but we are planning for the 3 different options, completely remote with some live service, or if it could possibly be all live service. We've sent surveys to the staff and to the families to see what they would be willing and able to access, and we hope to be able to pull that information quickly into a plan to get summer services out for all the students who have that in their IEPs. One of the, we've had many difficulties with this school closure and trying to meet some of our deadlines and not being able to have meetings that we were planning on having, but we've also had some great benefits of seeing some trends that we wouldn't have probably seen if it had not been for this closure. And it's really afforded us some time and opportunity to really focus in on Reading's reading services and thinking about how we are assessing students and delivering service. So I'm going to be providing you all more in-depth information in upcoming meetings. But I did want to give you a little bit of a preview of some of the work that we are doing. We've done observations in Andover, and we continue to work with Andover around their protocols for reading assessment and their language-based programming. But we are also working with Dr. Melissa Orkin and looking at really how are we assessing reading and thinking about reading evaluations in really 3 separate buckets of 1, our formal evaluation process, and are we assessing students appropriately when there's a referral question around reading? Are we looking at all of the different areas of reading and making sure we have good baseline data to then program for students? We're also looking at data collection around that daily instruction and weekly instruction so that teachers can make informed decisions about what they're doing and report out to that with parents. But we're also looking at creating some intermittent benchmark testing that we could use throughout the year with students. So we may do one in the fall and check in where all the students are functioning, be able to see if there had been any regression over the summer, use it definitely before any IEP meeting, and maybe another time during the year. Andover's used that model and it's been very successful, and it also will provide us with a lot of instructional data around how we are supporting students. And we are not only doing this work in our language-based programming, but we are doing it across all of our programs and within the Learning Center for all students that need reading services, because we really recognize that we need to be reflective practitioners that are always improving our practice, and we really have a strong scope and sequence and how we are spiraling back to teach skills and doing that with fidelity. And for example, as some of the research base that we've been doing as we look at all of our program descriptions, some studies say that 71% of students who have emotional disabilities also have some underlying learning disability. So we need to make sure the kids in that program are getting the reading support they need, as well as the social, emotional, behavioral support. So that is a bit of a summary of the hard work that is happening during the closure and will continue to happen. And we will be reporting out more in the future, but I just wanted to let people know about that work that is happening.
Thank you, Jen. Great. Gail, I know you're presenting tonight. Did you have anything else you wanted to report on?
I do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chris, welcome back. And again, we're very sorry about your mother.
Thank you.
I know it's hard.
I just wanted to say thank you to the school committee, the central office team, the principals, and really the entire community of Reading. The outpouring of support that we received with the sudden death of my mom in the middle of this pandemic. I think without closure, I know a lot of families are in the same space without being able to have proper funerals and wakes and all of that. Having the support of the Reading community that has been amazing to our family is just, it's really bolstered us during this. So thank you. We're doing okay. So I do have a couple of updates to echo Jen's statements. We're moving on. Next week's June 1st. We're working hard with remote learning. I think every week. Hopefully families are seeing this every week. We get a little stronger and better at this whole new way of teaching, which is really new to all of us. It's been amazing to me to see our staff grow and ask questions and really just try to make this work the best we can. And as I keep calling it, in this crisis education mode, it certainly hasn't been easy. So I appreciate everyone's hard work. I want to give a special shout out to the administrators and the teachers that have really just behind the scenes done so many hours, not only with remote learning, but also working on packing up classrooms, moving things, transitions, all of the normal end of the year things that look different and seem a little bit different and have to be really specially designed in this. It's just, I'm very, very proud of the Reading teams that have just been working really hard and really focused on kids. I'm sure people are going to talk about the senior parade, but that as an almost lifelong resident of Reading, it was a really awesome event and one that I was just so excited to see and just see the energy. So that was great. As you probably know, if you've received them, if you're a parent or maybe you haven't heard, we did send out surveys to different stakeholder groups. And those surveys will be opened until June 11th. And really, we're looking at information from professional teaching staff, all of the teachers that are designing instruction and asking their opinions on what worked in a remote learning, knowing that we're still not sure what next year or God forbid, the years ahead look like. We want to really have some concrete information. Although our surveys are short, they are especially designed to have open-ended ways to respond so that we can really take those answers and look for trends and themes. So far, we only sent them out today, and thank you to the principals for working on getting those out. We already have over 100 teachers who have responded. We are surveying students from 4th grade on up, and we're asking students to do that so we can hear the student voice in that. We're already over 200 students in that survey, and we're asking them questions of like, what did you find challenging about remote learning and what could have worked better? And then the parent survey, we're already up past 450 parents, and we're asking families to fill out one as sort of the theme for their whole family. So if you have 3 children, don't fill it out 3 times. Really, and those questions are what kind of challenges you had. We have sort of a rating of like in between things, how are you feeling? And we really tried to keep it simple so that we could look for trends. So Hopefully, our next school committee meeting is in 2 weeks' time. I will have the data from that. We'll start talking about that. And then on, hopefully, if the chair allows, we'll have a brief update on June 18th about curriculum and really the direction that we need to head. As you know, when school closed on March 13th, that really changes the way our curriculum works. Although a lot of preview, up until a few weeks ago, we were really focusing on review, and now we're really working on previewing skills, but we're really taking a look at what does next year curriculum pacing look like, knowing that we weren't in brick and mortar the last third of the school year. And we've already started that work. Elementary teachers are working on filling out a lot of pacing guides on where they are, and we're starting the conversations with the middle school principals as well as the high school teams. All our normal curriculum work as far as curriculum revision in social studies, which is our big theme right now, and we've started conversations on world language, as well as looking for math, algebra 1 textbooks. All of those normal teams are still meeting virtually. So we're on target to do that work just as we had planned all along. So it's been very, very busy, albeit remotely. And it's certainly, I don't know if I use the word exciting or nerve-wracking or all of those things, but again, I'm extremely proud to be part of a team that works so closely together, and where, one of the principals used a phrase, like, when people ask, like, how are we going to do this? And the comment was, we are going to, because we have to. So that's where we're at. We're here for the kids and we're here for the families of Reading, and we will figure this out no matter what the future provides. We're here to support the learners in Reading, and I'm proud to be part of that team. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Dr. Doherty?
Thank you, Chuck. I want to give a couple of updates. First, I want to echo what Chris said about the parade, and what an amazing event that was on Saturday. Just to see pretty much every graduate go through in their cars with their family was just an incredible experience. And I just want to thank Principal Boynton and officers Lewis, Vatcher, and Scouten, as well as Chief Clark and Chief Burns for everything that they did in the planning of that. I also want to thank Jordan's Furniture for allowing us to have the staging area for the beginning of the parade. Obviously, these are different times, and so it was really nice that Jordan's was able to provide that parking area for us to start the parade. It really was a true community event, and I think it really was therapeutic for our community for that parade to happen. So I just wanted to put a shout out for that and thank everyone who put in all that effort. I do want to give a couple of updates from the commissioner who we listened to yesterday. We continue to get dribs and drabs of what the future is going to look like. We got a little bit more information yesterday than we have been, so that was good. He talked a little bit about high school graduation guidance, which we had already received earlier, and I know that Principal Boynton is working on a graduation for late July, early August, which we do have to get whatever plan that we put together. We do have to get Board of Health approval for that. So we are working closely with the Board of Health and the rest of the Incident Command group with the plans for graduation. Just a couple of MCAS updates. So as you know, the MCAS for grade 10 and grade 9 science were canceled this year due to the pandemic. The MCAS for the science part, which was supposed to be taken by our grade 9 students, they are going to waive that competency determination for grade 9 students, and instead it's going to be what is called a transcript review. This is for the science piece only. So what a transcript review is that every student, in lieu of taking the MCAS science, will need to pass a approved science course for that area of science sometime during their 3 years remaining at Reading Memorial High School. So that is a change. The other piece that we learned is that the grade 10 MCAS, which was canceled in the spring, will be taken in either late fall or early winter of their junior year. So next, assuming that we're back in school, it will be next fall or winter of their junior year. They'll be taking the ELA and the math MCAS. So those are two updates that we had not heard of before. He did give us an update at the time on September 14th, but as we learned today, we will not be having the marathon now. So the September 14th is no longer going to be considered a school holiday because the marathon has been canceled. We also received a very detailed report from around the PPE requirements, which I know Mrs. Dowd will talk a little bit about in her financial update, that there are going to be some significant requirements on PPE for the start of school when students and staff enter back in. And the task force that the commissioner has put together, which is looking at what school is going to look like in the fall, is being led by Ed Davis, who you may know was a police commissioner in both Lowell and Boston. He was the police commissioner during the marathon bombing in 2013. And so he is working with DESE to come up with a plan for the fall. And he gave us a very detailed update of the type of PPE that we're going to be needing for the opening of school if we are back in a brick and mortar setting. And it ranges from the obvious, which are masks and hand sanitizers, to things, for thermometers and the more N95 type masks and face shields and things like that. So there's going to be a significant amount of PPE that's going to have to be purchased. The state is going to provide some relief, but we got the indication that this is going to be basically on the backs of local communities. So I know Gail is going to talk a little bit more about that as well, but more to come on that as well. So the other piece that the commissioner brought up was when, and I believe Jen Stice brought this up too, is that we hopefully will hear something about ESY next week. We're told that we're going to get some guidance, and we're going to get more guidance about the fall in mid-June, which isn't ideal, but we've been working behind the scenes on different types of models that we could be looking at. The commissioner is saying right now that he's essentially going to put forth two types of models, a hybrid model, which is going to have several different iterations, and a full opening model, which I'm not sure what that looks like. So more to come, but we did get more specific information than we normally do on that. In the end, the other thing, Mr. Robinson, I was wondering if I could have a couple of minutes to read a prepared statement.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So thank you. So this really is to both the school committee and to the greater Reading Public School community, and I do apologize in advance that this may be a little lengthy, but I felt it was important to say what I'm about to say. As all of you know, we are in an extraordinary time in our world and in the manner that we are providing education to our students. As I have communicated to you on several different occasions over the last few months, we have strategically and thoughtfully provided a remote learning experience for all students that addresses the social, emotional, and foundational needs and provides exposure to content and skills. This has been a journey that we never could have predicted. And throughout this period, our educational system has adapted and will continue to change tremendously in numerous unprecedented ways. It has been an incredible undertaking where our educators have risen to the challenge and calling to support our community. Throughout this period, I have been reflecting on my own personal journey and the next steps as both an educator and as a superintendent in the Reading Public Schools. I am immensely proud of our educators and feel that our collective success has been a journey that is following a strong course forward. With this in mind, I have made a personal choice and have decided that I will fulfill the remaining time on my contract and leave the Reading Public Schools at the end of my contractual obligations. I have chosen this time to announce this decision because moving forward, I would like our collective focus to be on making a successful transition back to school and doing what is best for our students. I will use my remaining time in Reading to lead us through this transition of the pandemic and work to set up the schools for continued success. Please be assured that I will continue to provide the leadership, hard work, and effort that I've always provided during my 32 years as an educator in the Reading Public Schools. My focus has been and always will be to benefit students, and I will do everything I can to position our school district for the next educational leader to be able to come in and continue to move this district forward. This decision is not one that I make lightly, especially in what we are facing, and yet I feel that it is the right decision for me personally in my own growth and professionalism. I will have an opportunity in the future to provide further reflection on my career here in Reading, one in which I am very proud, but I would be remiss to not take a moment and thank the people who have supported me along the way. First and foremost, I want to thank my family, my wife Laurie, and my daughters Erin and Shayla. They have supported me and inspired me in more ways than they will ever know throughout this journey. There are also many others who I've worked with over the years. You know who you are, and it includes current and past town officials, principals, directors, central office administrators, school committee members, parents, and teachers. We have always led by our moral compass as to what is in the best interest of all students and not the select few. We've always done the best that we could with the resources that were available to us, even during very difficult financial times. During my time in Reading, I have been a teacher, department head, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and superintendent, and led during many different crises and challenges that changed the way that our schools have operated, and it includes Columbine and Sandy Hook, failed overrides in 2002 and 2016, September 11th, the 2009 economic downturn, the H1N1 pandemic, the 2013 marathon bombing, successful overrides in 2004 and 2017, and now the COVID-19 pandemic. During each of those times, my focus and decisions at the level that I was at as a leader have always been on the children of Reading. It will never be any different, as at my core, it is my full belief that we are here for our students. I am proud of the work that our building principals and directors have done over the past few years with their schools and programs. Collectively, this is the best team that I have ever worked with at one time. We have improved our academics and social emotional learning, as well as our food service, technology infrastructure, and facilities. Over the last several years, we have managed our budgets as effectively and as efficiently as possible and have positioned ourselves for this current crisis. I am grateful to the work that our leadership has done in these areas. As I reflect on my time in Reading, I have not always been perfect. No one ever is as a leader. I have made mistakes along the way and have learned and grown from them. I have also learned that as a leader, I recognize that in doing my job effectively, I was not going to please everyone. I've had to make difficult decisions. Many were not popular at the time, but in my heart, it was the right thing to do for kids. Yet by focusing on the needs of our students, we were stronger in each decision made. In my 32 years in education, there have been a few constants in my beliefs and values. I have always led by integrity, ethics, and my morals. I have worked within the fiscal parameters of our town, working to maximize our learning within a limited budget. I have listened and changed based on the feedback that I have received. I have always prioritized the things that matter: safety and security, social emotional learning, and the academics. This is the heart of our school system. Finally, I want to thank the town of Reading and the Reading Public Schools for taking a chance and giving me this opportunity 32 years ago when I was first hired as a middle school science teacher at Coolidge. When I first started, I never imagined where I would end up. The journey has been and will continue to be amazing, and I hope that I've made a difference in the lives of many children and adults along the way. It has been a privilege and more to come.
Thank you, John, for your thoughtful remarks, and I, Rob, respect everything you said. And as you said, there'll be time to talk about this more. I'm still processing it, but as I said, I think it was 2009. You think I used the term at the time. You got a battlefield promotion at a time when we lost a well-loved leader in this community, and Pat Scattini, and I thank you for stepping up at that time and taking over at a time when the staff and the community needed that thoughtful leadership that you provided. And also at the same time, I think it was in the midst of the financial crisis at that time as well. And again, there'll be time to reflect and talk about this, but I thank you for this and your statement and for all that you've done. So thank you. Did anyone else want to say anything? Or okay, so is Maria Morgan with? Hi, Maria.
Hello.
Welcome.
How are you?
And thank you very much. I know we've got this on the calendar a while ago, and I'm glad that we finally gotten to it. And thank you to you and the rest of the board for putting this together. So
It is our pleasure. We're happy to present. We didn't know if there would be time for it with everything going on, but there is, and we're happy to be here. So I am presenting on behalf of the other board members. I have pictures of them here to put a face, but I don't think I'm actually on the screen, but I'm holding it up anyway. So this is our annual report to the school committee. And so on the next slide, it says who the board members are for this year. The 2019-2020 board members were myself and Laura Noonan and Alyssa Scaparati and Amy Stewart. We were a completely new board this year, first-time board members, so we had a lot to learn. And so tonight we're going to go through our mission statement, and I'll talk about the goals that we had set out at the beginning of the year, and then we'll talk about our year at a glance, some highlights and accomplishments, and then areas we would like to grow in. And then we'll talk about the COVID-19 time period that we're in, and then we'll look ahead to next year. Okay, so this slide is the Reading CPAC mission statement, and I promise that I'm not going to read every slide that I have up here, but I do want to read this one because it clarifies exactly what the CPAC sets out to do. So the mission of the Reading Special Education Parent Advisory Council, known as CPAC, our mission is to work for the understanding of, the respect for, and the support of all children with special needs in the community. And to that end, we work to promote a network of parents of children with special needs and provide a forum to share information. We advise the Director of Student Services, the school committee, and superintendent on special education programs and policies and parent and teacher training needs. We promote communication and sharing of information between members and local groups and councils and organizations, and also at the state level and national level. and within the community to encourage understanding and acceptance and inclusion of students with special needs. And we aim to provide informational workshops to parents, educators, students, and professionals. So the word CPAC is thrown around. Sometimes people don't know necessarily what it stands for or what our mission is. And that's, there it is. That's what was written, I think it was in 2016. Okay, so we will now talk about the goals that we set out for the beginning of the year. So as I said, we were a brand new board, and so we knew we needed to orient ourselves and develop efficacy to make sure that we could be an effective CPAC. We wanted to welcome and engage families, especially by publicizing CPAC, get a Facebook page going, and increase attendance and engagement from parents and caregivers. We had the goal of providing support for caregivers. That came out, our November meeting, that definitely came out from members that parents were looking to have support going through this journey. So that was one of our goals. Collaborate with district officials, especially the new director of student services, Dr. Jennifer Stice, and identify needs for systemic advocacy and provide that advocacy. So systemic advocacy means issues that are not just an individual issue, but trends and things that are happening in more than one place, where as a CPAC, as a collective group, we can advocate and say this would be something that would help parents at large, as opposed to an individual advocacy. Like, we don't get involved with that, but we would advocate in terms of more systemic level issues. Okay, so our next slide. Here is our year at a glance. So we'll start with some accomplishments. So one of the biggest things we wanted to do was increase CPAC awareness, and we feel like we've done that in the community. We've had a lot of support in doing that. Some of the ways we publicized CPAC were we have flyers at team meetings that are passed out, and Dr. Stice started that fairly immediately when she started. We have new posters that are at all the schools. The principals have been wonderful. They include our updates in their newsletters, district newsletters such as Pathways and the RPS happenings. We've been able to have our information in there to get our information out to a wider audience. We use our listserv, so we have a mailing list. It's confidential, so we have a lot of members that are on that mailing list, and we can pass out information that way. We did start a Facebook page, and then we also would share posts on other Facebook groups to try to get our name out there more. And we did update the website, our webpage. So we had, early on, we had this role of the CPAC presentation. So the FCSN is the Federation for Children with Special Needs, and part of the FCSN is MassPAC, and MassPAC is an organization that supports CPACs in the state. So they put on this presentation. So we had the woman come, her name is Leslie, and she came and presented to us. And I remember at the time I was joking because I would tell all my friends, you got to go to CPAC, and it's really important. You have to come to CPAC. But then I also was like, now what is CPAC? What do we do? So we had this presentation, and it was very helpful for me to learn the purpose of a CPAC. And then we learned about ways to engage families, and we learned about the benefits of a CPAC, and we learned about the structure of a CPAC and how to do operational procedures. Some of the benefits of an effective CPAC, and these are some of the, our goals, are things that we're hoping to achieve. Benefits are outreach, positive relationships, collaborative problem solving, system change based on input. Trust, CPAC can be a trusted source of information. We share information, and an effective CPAC can bring about improved services and programs and a deepened trust among all stakeholders. And from that presentation, I copied this quote from one of the slides because I thought it was very interesting and important. The success of a CPAC hinges on its ability to shape the input it collects from parents into concrete issues and to direct that information to district decision makers in ways that lead to positive changes in services, policies, and programs. Many of our efforts this year were to engage families so that we can do these good things. And as we learned at that role of the CPAC presentation, we're not the decision makers. You all are the decision makers, but an effective CPAC can provide input from the parents and help to advise. And so let's see what else. We had increased attendance at our meetings, including the basic rights workshop that we presented in January on understanding the IEP. There were 38 attendees, including 3 administrators, and we were always very grateful to have administrator presence at our meetings. It was nice to see that support. I remember at that workshop, we ran out of materials, and I remember Chris Kelly kept getting up to get more chairs because more parents were coming in than we anticipated, and I thought those were both wonderful problems to have. So we definitely did increase our attendance at that. And let's see, we had a designated CPAC budget liaison this year. So Michelle Sanfi, she brought back budget information for us and was able to provide updates, which was wonderful. We did a lot of outreach with community partners. So we reached out to Metco. We participated in the Reading Educational Foundation Festival of Trees. We did some work with Understanding Disabilities this year. We had them come to one of our meetings because, as you know, they were at a crossroads this year. And so we wanted to have them come to our meetings so that a lot of the parents that maybe most personally benefit from their programs, might be able to lend some support. And so they did get some more volunteers from that meeting. And then we presented at their community forum to talk about how important it is. So we had a nice, we both benefit from each other. So we've been working with them. And we've done some outreach to neighboring communities, CPACs. And then on our next slide, I think we have pictures of our tree from the Festival of Trees. So our theme was many colors, one pack. So the idea of a pack of crayons has many colors. So, one parent advisory council, but the different colors would be all the different families and all the different diagnoses and disabilities that are represented in our families. And it showed to me that there are a lot of families out there that maybe they're not able to make it to our meetings, but that they're still part of CPAC and they make up the wonderful collection of families that we are. I'd have a pack of markers show up from a parent that I hadn't met or hadn't seen at any meetings, but, they're out there and we do represent, a large collection of families through the city, through the town. Okay, so more accomplishments. Okay, so a lot of collaboration with the school and district administrators. We had regular meetings with Dr. Stice and Miss Wright, Allison Wright, this year. Dr. Stice came to the CPAC early in the year and asked us what was most important to parents, and that she, what we thought she should turn her attention to right away. And CPAC stressed the importance of updating the program descriptions. And as we heard earlier, those programs descriptions have now been redrafted. So we were happy to work in that way to express that it was something that parents really definitely did want to see this year. And I know there were many, many, many priorities this year, but it was nice to see that that was one. And then so another issue that some parents, there had been a news article a couple years ago or a year ago about seclusion and restraint. And, there was a lot of questions, I think, among parents about, what are the policies that Reading Public Schools has about seclusion and restraint. And so Lauren Sabella, the behavioral health coach for Reading Public Schools, came and did a presentation for us at one of our meetings. It was very thorough and comprehensive, so it was really good to get that information straight from Ms. Sabella. And let's see what else. Section 504 resources. So that was another thing that Dr. Stice, our meeting, how she had a new binder, a binder that was created that had all the 504 policies and we talked about, well, can parents access this too? Can parents see it? And we came up with, a plan that parents could see the materials. It wouldn't be on the website, but just to have that ability to talk about it and share, find a way to share the information for parents was very nice. And then we had you may remember the tiered focus monitoring that happened. So DESE monitors school districts for compliance with special education and civil rights laws and regulations that impact student outcomes. And part of that is meeting with CPAC, and part of that is also a parent survey. So CPAC really worked to try to encourage parents to fill out that survey. And there were about 114 parent responses, and we are told that that is a very high number. So we were very glad about that whatever the tiered focus monitoring group got, it was as representative as we could get from the community. And so back to that basic rights, the understanding the IEP workshop. So the Mass PAC Plus membership, so that's our CPAC membership to access these resources for CPACs. That's funded by the district. So we're very happy for that. So we were able to have this workshop. And parents are team members, and these workshops help us feel confident in our roles. So my son, Jonas, we knew about his disability when he was just a few months old. So I went through the early intervention process. And if you do that, then you have a service coordinator who walks you through the whole process of turning 3 and transitioning to an IEP. And she said to me, you have to go to the workshop, and you'll learn a lot of information. So I did all that. I was able to do all that even before Jonas turned 3. And I remember at that time not feeling confident that I would even know what to contribute at a team meeting, even though I was the parent. It's intimidating, and you don't know all the educational jargon, even though I am an educator, but still it's different when it's your own child. So, but that workshop really helped me understand how much I can contribute and how much my husband can contribute, and how important it is that we do, that it's not helpful if we're not contributing, we're holding back for what our child, should be doing and should be getting. And so the more we do that, all of us, the more the whole team pools our resources, then we're truly a team coming together for the child. And then if there are areas of disagreement, it's probably easier to creatively solve problems if you've felt like a contributing member of the team the entire time, and if everybody feels like everybody is a contributing member. So when parents do understand their rights and understand IEPs, we can be more confident in our collaboration, and ultimately it benefits the child. I have a friend with a middle school child who's been on an IEP for a number of years, but she came to this basic rights workshop, and she said she learned a lot and she wished she had attended earlier. So, for us, it's really important to make sure that we get parents engaged in CPAC for lots of reasons, but one of the things that it allowed us to do was to promote that workshop, and we were very glad that we had the increased attendance. Okay, so then for areas of growth and improvement, so I mentioned the Federation for Children with Special Needs. So that organization has a ton of resources and information and workshops and trainings. And, a lot of Reading families probably would benefit from them. And they're on a wide range of topics, but we just are not at the point as a CPAC yet to really, we haven't, I don't think, advertised them enough. We haven't really put them out there enough. So that's one thing we'd like to encourage or let people realize how much access they do have to a lot of wonderful resources. Earlier in the year, we had a linked up proposal. That's something we'd like to look into more. And the linked up proposal is proposed by a CPAC parent. And the idea is that a parent of a child that's coming into a program would be linked up with a parent of a child already in the program, just to have like a buddy to sort of ask questions or just get acquainted with the program and just to not feel so alone and so isolated. So we were not able to really go anywhere with that this year. So that is something we want to look at in the future. And And also, you know, a CPAC parent liaison for each school would be really helpful. We didn't develop that. You know, I kind of acted as one for the 2 schools that my children are involved in, and I feel like having that personal connection between CPAC and the school administrator is helpful to get the information out to all the parents. As I mentioned before, at one of our early meetings, a lot of parents were saying that they want support. We just weren't able to get any sort of a parent support program together this year. You know, the board was kind of maxed out as it was just kind of getting on, but that's something we'd like to look at, and we know it's something that parents want. And social opportunities, you know. And then engage underrepresented groups. So, for example, on our board, we all have young children. One of us does have a child who's going to be moving into middle school, but I mean, for the most part, we're 4 moms with young children, and 3 of us are attorneys, and I'm a teacher. So there's not like a ton of diversity on our board, and we'd like to open that up. We'd especially like to get more voice from families with secondary level students. You know, METCO families, families transitioning from early intervention, those that don't like quite make that transition to being involved in CPAC right away. And then families that aren't connected or linked up with a network already, a network of parents of children with a disability. So I mentioned that my son had, you know, his diagnosis came at a few months old. So I'm already kind of in networks, and I get the benefit of having a network of parents, you know, who are in similar situations. But, you know, if you're not in that situation, you know, if it's a disability that becomes apparent a little later on, or, you know, I go out and I wear my Williams syndrome t-shirts all the time because I've done a million walks for Williams syndrome, but then 2 of my other kids have ADHD. I don't wear ADHD t-shirts, and I'm not doing ADHD walks. So, you know, there are some diagnoses that you maybe don't have that kind of network built in already. So I think there are a lot of parents out there that maybe don't understand how beneficial it can to be in a network such as CPAC. So we'd like to engage, you know, underrepresented groups, and also collaborate with school parent teacher organizations. As I mentioned at my own schools, Rise and Barrows, I've done a fair amount of that, and I find it very beneficial, and they've been wonderful. So we'd like to expand that to make sure all of the parent teacher organizations have a nice interactive relationship with CPAC. Okay, so so COVID-19 and the transition to remote learning. So that was all prior to COVID-19. So then, of course, that happened. And very, very soon after the closure happened, Dr. Stice and Allison Wright reached out to us and invited CPAC board members to weekly video conferences with district officials. So Dr. Doherty and Dr. Stice and Allison Wright and Chris Kelly, and we have Erin Gaff in there, and I'm probably forgetting somebody, but so we have these check-ins with them every week, and it's really, really helpful. And I mentioned to Leslie from MassPAC that we do that, and she was very impressed, and she thought it was awesome that we have this opportunity to meet every week. So we get updates from them, and then we have the opportunity to pass on input that we're getting from parents, and it's been very helpful during this remote learning period. So we've solicited feedback from parents, and we've received I guess 33 communications from families. I feel like it's a little bit more than that, but that's, you know, that's about what it is. And that would be, you know, 33 families. Like, it's not, you know, one person emailing 33 times. And we were able to then give credible, accurate sources of information to families. So we gave DESE guidance. We were able to point them in the direction of webinars from the Federation for Children with Special Needs. We were able to point out district emails. You know, somebody called me once and said, you know, does this continuation of learning plan, does it replace the IEP? And it was really easy for me to say, no, it doesn't. And in fact, go to this, you know, letter from this date, and it will tell you specifically. So we were able to be very knowledgeable and share that kind of information with parents. We're very grateful for the district's collaboration with the CPAC and for their consideration of the feedback that we've given them. You know, I would see things that we talked about in the meetings. I would see those in letters that came out in subsequent weeks, and it just felt very good to know that we were being listened to, and the concerns that we were bringing were definitely considered. Okay, so looking ahead to our next year. So of course, it's, so much is up in the air right now, but we're going to have to support and engage families in whatever the new situation is for next year, whatever that new normal is. Helping parents know about special education rights in these new remote learning circumstances. So probably virtual CPAC meetings. I know Melrose had one recently, so we can look into doing that. We'd like to do that. We haven't been able to pull it together for this year, but for next year, that may be the direction we need to go, and also to make sure that it's compliant with open meeting laws. So seeking board members. So we can have up to 6 people on our board. So this year, 4 people put their names in for consideration. So, in a very hotly contested election, we all won. So we all got to be on the board. That means we have 2 members, we have 2 positions left, and many hands makes light work. And I was looking at some other CPAC's websites, and, some districts have, 8 or 10 people's names listed for various roles. Like I said, liaisons for the different schools, or a website manager. There's lots of opportunities for more active engagement, but we are looking for new board members, especially, as I said, like, we have young kids, most of us, so it would be very nice to have a board member with a middle or a high school student. And more support and social opportunities. We know parents want that, and we didn't deliver on that this year, really. So we'd like to look ahead and to see what we can do next year. Okay, so my next slide is lots of thanks. So we have a lot of special thanks for CPAC parents and caregivers. We want to thank all the parents who have participated in CPAC events this year and who have communicated with us, who have responded with feedback. Because the more input we get, the more representative we can be. The more we hear from parents, the better equipped we are to really advocate for what's, what our families want. We want to give special thanks, I mentioned her before, to Michelle Sanfie, who was our budget liaison, and she would regularly flag important communications from DESE and from the Federation for Children with Special Needs during this public health crisis. So we're appreciative of that. Sarah McLaughlin, last year, she was the CPAC board. She was the only member on the board, and she kept it afloat. And so she helped us make a smooth transition this year. I want to thank, we're very thankful for the groups that I've mentioned, like the Federation for Children with Special Needs and NASPAC. And then SPAN is the Special Parent Advocacy Network. I'm not getting that right, but they joined with FCSN, and they've provided a lot of resources for families and CPACs during this closure, but one that was very helpful was a webinar with the Senior Associate Commissioner, Russell Johnston. It was incredibly informative. It was, just a few weeks ago, it was about the closure. And it really confirmed that Reading was following state guidelines regarding the closure. We heard some stories about other districts and problems that people were having, and it was very, very helpful to us to say, everything that we're seeing is right in line with what the state is providing guidance on. We want to thank our school committee liaisons, Jean Borowski at the beginning of the year, and then Erin Gaffin now, and they come to our meetings, and then they report back to you all. So thank you for that. So Student Services Director, Jennifer Stice. Dr. Stice has been a champion for school family partnerships and relationship building. Her constant commitment to collaboration is a model to be followed, and we are all better for it. She enthusiastically embraced a partnership with CPAC even before her official start date last summer. She came to one of our meetings last spring. She's been one of our biggest promoters, so we're very, very grateful for that model that she provides and for the leadership that she provides. We also thank the Student Services Assistant Director, Allison Wright, for her presence and her active involvement in CPAC Matters. We want to thank school and district administrators for partnering with CPAC this year and helping us to promote it. And, on a personal note, my children are involved at Rise and at Barrows. So I'm very thankful for Kelly Bostwick and Beth Levitt because they have shown me that what a good partnership is. Both of them eliminated, there were some conflicts between PTO or PTN and CPAC meeting dates. Both of them eliminated those conflicts. They let me talk about CPAC at open houses. They always put the CPAC info in newsletters. They display signs. They partner with me and my husband for our children. And we don't always 100% agree on all matters, but we're always partners. And I have that experience, and that makes me confident talking to other parents. I don't know everybody's situation. But I know that I feel confident encouraging parents to collaborate with team chairs and to talk to administrators and to try to work with people because I've been able to do that personally. And we want to thank Anne Marie Foley, who's wonderful, for her administrative assistance and her incredibly pleasant demeanor. She is just super. And just a couple final words about family engagement. We know that family engagement translates into higher school achievement. And so the DESE Commissioner, Jeffrey Riley, this is a quote from him. He says, when schools, families, and community groups work together to support learning, children tend to do better in school. They stay in school longer and they like school more. And families are school's first essential partner. Principals and teachers must engage our families as true partners. I'm adding on to that our children benefit greatly and all of our lives are enriched because of the many ways people in Reading have partnered together. And we want to thank everyone who has worked for the understanding of, the respect for, and the support of all children with special needs in the community. We feel like we are in a good position to continue this good work into the next year, and we invite wide participation in that. And our final slide shows ways that you can connect with CPAC. So we have an updated website. Right now, the top half is really full of COVID-19 stuff, but as you go down, you'll see what the website normally is. It has the meeting dates on it. It has our email addresses on it. There's a lot of information, like helpful links on the right side. And then there are links to, for example, our presentations that we had. So the role of the CPAC presentation, there's a link to it there, so you can go and see that information. We have a Facebook page. We used to not have one. We have one now, so that's a way that we can get information out to people. And I always encourage people to click on the settings that you want to see our posts, because otherwise they kind of get hidden. And if anybody wants to be on our mailing list, there's our email address there, cpacreading@gmail.com. And it's, as I said, it's confidential, so we put everybody's name in the BCC part, so you don't see all the different email addresses. And then, of course, you can email any board member. So the CPAC Reading is the general one, but we each have a email address as well. So those are on the website, and you are welcome to reach out to any of us. Thus concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Maria. That was excellent and thorough. And I know I'm speaking for the committee and the district staff when I say, we give a huge thank you for all the positive energy and work that the CPAC is doing. It's really, we hear from the liaisons, and it's always really good to hear good positive reports. So thank you again to all you, the board, and the rest of the board and all the committee members.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for this time tonight.
Tom, did you have something? Yeah, I just wanted to extend the thanks as well. And Maria, I've attended those meetings as a parent, as you're well aware. Mm-hmm. And I think the programming that you guys have put together this year was bar none excellent. It was amazing. You guys did a great job. I also want to extend my thanks to Dr. Stice and Mrs. Wright and Mrs. Kelly, as they were pretty much constant there throughout the year, always supporting that line of communication was clearly wide open there, and that was amazing to see. So you did a great job, the four of you. I hope all four of you stick around. I'm hopeful that you get a little additional help there too to carry the weight for you. I thought the charter said 7, but I'll take 6. It's 2 more, whatever it takes for you. I think that's great.
Maybe it is. I don't know.
I could be wrong. It wouldn't be the first time, won't be the last time either. But I had one quick question for you as well is, obviously we're using this platform for this meeting. Have you all considered or talked about whether you need our help or the district's help to hold your own, public meeting via Teams or something else over this period? I know you've been talking privately with Dr. Stice, and Aaron's been able to attend, and the rest of the administration team, but have you considered having a public CPAC meeting as well over this platform or another one?
Yes, we have. Yes, we would need help, and we just could not put that together this spring. So we do want to look into it for next year. And at one point we were like, maybe we'll do a virtual meeting this spring, but that is not happening. We cannot do that. But yes, we are looking into it for next year.
Hopefully you won't have to do it next year.
Right,
Hopefully we can all be in person, but
that would be even better. Yes.
We'll see. But again, I just want to thank you guys. You did a great year. You did a great job. The content was amazing. And
Thank you for your support. Thank
the
you.
marketing as well. I guess I forgot to call out the marketing that was done, to raise the profile, I think, was a great job by the group as well.
Thank you.
So just keep it up.
The district printed all the posters and flyers for us, so we thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. Thanks again, Maria.
Oh, you're welcome. And bye-bye. I'm out of here.
Take care.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay. Gail, I'm sorry, Jen Allard. We're going to do the personnel update first. Hi, Jen.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? So yes, I do have our quarterly personnel report for everyone this evening. Due to some of the changes that we had in the meetings and what was scheduled for the school committee meetings, I felt that it was best that we, at this point, combine what would typically be separate, which is our second and third quarter personnel report, given the time of year. So what was put into the packet is reflective of our second and third quarter, as we would term them. It's relevant from the dates of December 10th to May 8th. What I typically do with these reports is I do feel they're relatively self-explanatory, but I do like to go through them just very quickly and walk through it, just to give a little narrative to it, and hopefully that can answer some of your questions that you may have. If it doesn't, then once I go through all of it, I'm happy to take any questions at that time. So to begin, as I stated, the report is reflective of personnel changes that have occurred from December 10th through May 8th. As you can see below in the first table, that is representative of the newly hired employees that we brought on during this time. So you'll see that there are 7 newly hired, which account for a total of 6.09 FTEs combined. So I want to reiterate, as I always do, that this report is reflective of what we term professional employees for the sake of this report, but it is inclusive of our teachers, administrators, paraeducators, custodial workers, and our secretaries specifically. And then there's a little definition on that first page in the paragraph describing that, and also a list of who is not included within the report. And also a quick little, as I always do, put in a little chart for our FTE conversions, because we do treat some of our positions from a HR standpoint, a budgeting standpoint, personnel standpoint, sometimes in biweekly hours, but it's just more effective and helpful that we convert those for you. So there's a little chart for that conversion as well on that first page. So as I stated in the first table, we did bring on 7 new hires during this time, accounting for 6.09 FTEs. Below that in table 2, we like to reflect out for you which of those newly hired positions were budgeted, which were maybe new or add to staffs, or which were maybe transferred from other areas within the schools. As you can see, all of the newly hired employees we brought on were into budgeted positions. So you will only see one table, table 2, that reflects that. I wanted to add a little commentary briefly just about internal transfers. This was something new we started doing in, I think, the past maybe 2 quarterly reports. The reason why is because we've initially reflected the report off of mainly our newly hired employees in the fillings of those open requisitions with newly hired employees. What we felt we were missing was a little bit of the picture. We do have a lot of transfers that occur, so we may have open positions that happen within the district that others who are already internal with us transfer into. So just for the sake of what I did want to add in that during the time of these 2 quarters, we did have 18 internal transfers occur, none of which resulted in any increase in FTEs, no additions to staff, just pure transfers. I also felt it relevant to speak a little bit further about open job requisitions. Oftentimes I will speak about what are some open requisitions we have, job requisitions we had in the district at the time. Unfortunately, and obviously due to the impacts of COVID-19 and our change into this remote world and our remote learning, the district has not brought on and had no intentions of bringing on any additional staff for the remainder of this year, given the needs of how we've transitioned into the remote world. So at this time, we aren't actively pursuing or looking to fill any vacant positions. Luckily, we've been pretty fortunate during this time. We have not had any significant positions leave in which we've needed to act upon or attempt to fill. So I wanted to make sure that it was just noted that for this school year, that's why you're not seeing any of those open job requisitions being spoken about at this point. For the 2020-2021 school year, we have begun, and though it's not of relevance for this time frame of this personal report, I also felt it was important to just give a brief mention about what our plan is moving forward. We have been focusing on hiring of positions for next year, so that has not stopped. Other surrounding districts, similar districts, in districts in the state have continued this as well. So we wanted to make sure that we were keeping pace with that and that we were still ensuring that we were bringing on high quality educators for opening vacancies that will occur for next year. So we're truly focusing on what we are really considering essential positions. So at this time, it's mainly been teacher positions that we have continued to post for, and that will continue to move forward in that fashion, given what we know right now. I'd like to move forward to table 3. We did have during this time 4 teachers who were separated from the district. I do like to report out on the reasons for those separations. As you can see, we did have 1 involuntary termination during this time. We had 1 leave due to a career change and 2 leave due to career advancement and different opportunities. So below that, you'll see a list of what those reason codes mean to give you a little context. So we typically don't, these are usually some smaller personnel reports as opposed to usually my first quarter, which is large and full of all of our fun changes. So I would like to think it's relatively straightforward, but I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. Jen, just 2 questions, and they're probably more newbie questions than they are about the content in this one specifically. For table 3, these are the actual separation dates occurred in Q2 and Q3. So it's not like we received notice in Q3 for somebody who's resigning at the end of the year. Is that correct?
Correct. These staff members are separated.
Okay. And then in table 4, is there? I'm just curious where these reason codes have. Like, where do they come from? Is this from a best practices somewhere or something like that? The reason that I ask is it's always occurred to me that this table doesn't really include any reason codes that I would say express dissatisfaction right? You know, maybe job demands gets at it a little bit. And you know, I kind of find the reasons, like, you know, not as helpful as they could be if we were also getting at some of those reasons. It might be more about, you know, I wasn't sort of happy where I was versus there was something better, you know, on the other side.
Sure, absolutely. No, I appreciate the feedback, John. I can tell you that these were created back when, I would say probably roughly 2 years ago now, to help give, again, just to help give context. So they were created internally by myself in creating the reports. I will say what they initially were there for were just really as a guide. And I think what's tough is, you know, in my work with all staff, and though we're specifically speaking about teachers, there can be some very detailed reasons as to why people are leaving, and to detail all of that out, I think would become very complicated, and also wanted to respect confidentiality for reasons as well. So I do appreciate the feedback though, and I do agree. I would be happy to take another look at that. And if you're not finding, if the committee's not finding those descriptions to be as helpful as they could be.
Yeah, I don't want to overstate it. I mean, I find the fact that you do this really helpful, and to your point, right? If it was a, you know, really negative perspective, the person might just choose none given and move on anyway. So so I'm not sure how much more data we would get. I just wonder if this captures the full gamut of reasons that people really leave. And I hear what you say as well, that, you know, you could write 100 different reasons if you wanted to.
Yeah, but no, I appreciate the feedback completely, and I'm more than happy to continue that it appropriately fits, you know, the needs of what the committee's looking for.
Okay, thank you. Carla?
Thanks, Chuck. Hi, Jen. My question was kind of along the same lines in terms of exit interviews. And are exit interviews done, and how is that information gathered or shared? Obviously, you want to respect confidentiality, but how is that information, and how is it used as a lessons learned type of situation as well?
Yep, I'm happy to talk about that. So we offer two means. We do offer, if requested, an in-person sit down. So I'm always more than happy to meet, if requested, with an employee who is leaving, who is looking to speak a little bit more about their experiences. The reason right now why that is essentially optional, not required, and is upon request, is just due to the amount of staff that we have turnover in a year, which isn't beyond typical really for a district, but we could have up to, you know, about 30 to 40 just teachers leaving in a summer. That's not counting every other staff member. So with me being really the only one who would be overseeing that and doing that, to take that time, sadly, and unfortunately, the bandwidth in my department just isn't there for that. But we do offer as a secondary option. And again, I would like to just stress that all of this information that I gather is presented to the employee as confidential. So for me to present that out in any other way after collecting it, other than in a means that I do to you guys in the personnel reports, really would not be appropriate. Just so you know, it's not by me wishing to withhold any sort of information. It is presented to the employee as confidential. So the way that I can reflect that information out, I just need to be really mindful and cautious with. So to that note, we do offer a secondary option. We do email out to both the work email and the personal email to the employee who is separating from the district for voluntary reasons. We do send out a survey that we've maintained and have updated and have had in effect for probably about, I would say, about 6 years now. And we do allow for that to come through confidentially from the employee. That information is looked at. Typically, it's most effective take a look at that at the beginning of each school year, because really I'm seeing the bulk of the response in the summer when we're seeing the bulk of the staff transition as you do in a school district. So I typically will take a look at it around then, and it helps to guide me through my collection of information and presenting of information in the personnel reports. John, Dari, and I have had conversations about them in the past to help try and kind of guide and direct us and see if we've been noticing any trends. But ultimately we've been using them to kind of just to report out in this format. And again, they've been presented to the employee as confidential. So for us to kind of report out on in any other expanded detail on that would really be inappropriate for me to do in my role. But if that helps to answer, that's kind of our current model right now with the exit interviews.
Chuck, may I have a follow-up?
Sure.
In terms of the confidentiality piece, what is the expectation of the employee in terms of them sharing information with you? Is the expectation, while maintaining confidentiality, that a direct supervisor is notified, or, you know, are they expecting that information gets up through all channels, up through the superintendent, or what is their expectation for sharing that information with you, and what's going to be?
Yep. So first and foremost, it's optional. So they can choose to not if they do not wish to. By no means do we require that upon them leaving the district. It is, the understanding is that it's sent to me directly. Oftentimes, it's best that is set up in that way, because the hope is it does create not only a sense of confidentiality, but actual confidentiality for the employees to feel like they're coming to one centralized place where they can voice any concern that they have. There's a possibility the concern could be about the supervisor, so by no means would I want that going, directly out to them. It would be most appropriate for it to channel through the HR director. When I do read through them, I am scanning as well for any additional concerns that I might see come up. Though an employee may leave a district, if I see anywhere in there concerning reports or information, by no means does that go overlooked. I always take any complaints of those nature or notifications of issues or concerns very seriously, and I oftentimes would investigate into it if I felt necessary, even if the employee has left it.
Thank you.
Jen, and I know Aaron's coming up, but I just wanted to follow up on Carla's question. So, in my opinion, exit interviews can be an extremely valuable management tool. And I know I know that there's so many people, we have a lot of turnover. It's hard to do 40 plus whatever exit interviews. Has there been any discussion about exit interviews for certain levels, like teaching levels or principal levels, stuff like that, or is it just we just don't do them at all?
We've been consistent in our messaging at all levels that they're available upon request. And again, by no means have we ever required it for a position.
Okay. Thank you. Aaron?
Hi, Jen. I have 2 questions for you, and thank you for this report. I agree. I find it helpful. Per Sean's point about the reasons why people leave, I feel like one of the #1 criticisms I hear from teachers is that teachers leave to make more money in other districts, and I'm not sure that that's captured in the table. Is there a possibility of adding something like that, or do you feel like there's another way that you get information like that to at least know if that is indeed a trend?
I would say the first thing that I oftentimes will see is surprisingly, when, if I've, had conversations with or attempted information either from, principals about why they've maybe heard that it is leaving, oftentimes that presents itself in career advancement or again, seeking of other opportunities. But if there's probably a way we can attempt to do that. The survey that we do send out does have that as an option as well. So there's a section for that. There's probably a way that we could look to gather some of that information through that tool and then present it out if we're able to pull it from there kind of in a joined and combined way, and not individually. That's probably the most appropriate way to do it. So we would be able, I'm confident we would be able to probably gather some of that information more clearly.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I'm not looking to betray anyone's confidentiality. I'm more wondering if it is a trend, because it's certainly something I feel like I hear a lot about. My other question is, and I don't know how much you can speak to this yet, but what kind of teacher turnover are you seeing for next year? And given the situation that we're in, I'm wondering if it's higher or even lower than normal.
Yeah, for next year, I would say at this point, we're pretty typical. Nothing has been alarming to me. Nothing seems off trend. What complicates this is the unknown of our current situation with the pandemic, and the unknown of what our fall, what our next school year looks like. I wouldn't be surprised to see if, we have some increase based on what those new models look like and what our new normal might look like. So it's kind of tough to predict. It wouldn't surprise me to see an increase in that. I have not heard I do connect pretty regularly with some other district HR directors, and we talk pretty frequently about some of these issues. I have not had any direct conversations yet with any districts who've been seeing this already, but it's things like this that we have started to talk about and that we do anticipate may occur, depending on what the new normal looks like, what the structure of the school day looks like, and then of the school year looks like. So it is a possibility, unfortunately, that we may see an increase in that. That is more than what we typically would have seen.
Thank you, Jen.
Hey, Jen, so I just have something that Aaron brought up too. So is there I'm not as familiar as you are with the Family First Act. Does that go on in perpetuity, or does that sunset when we get through all the phases of reopening?
Initially, when it came out, it did have a sunset date of the last day in December. I don't anticipate that continuing on kind of forever as a new option for leave for employees. I would anticipate that, no matter how many times it ends up being extended, that there would be a date in which that would sunset. I don't believe that is, to my knowledge and my understanding, I don't believe that that's something that they would be looking to create as a new option of leave for employees.
Right, thank you. Anyone else? Great, thanks, Jen, that was great.
Thank you, everyone.
Gail, there she is.
With the new blurred background, I finally figured it out 3 months in. Great, thank you. In the packet that you received is the most recent update to the fiscal 20 budget. So we are currently showing about a $355,000 surplus, but I will sort of walk through some of that. I imagine people were expecting to see kind of a much larger number with everything that has transpired. But I will also let the committee know that we are continuing to meet. I meet with Jen Sties at least weekly, her, Anne Marie, Chris Schweitzer, and Allison Wright, and we are digging through all of the special ed items. We're meeting with Chris Kelly to go through all of her items, with Julian Carr to go through all of technology. So we're still going through and scrubbing all of the numbers. And as you'll see as I walk through it, what we have done is, I will say, redeployed some of our savings to be able to reinvest in the district in strategic ways. So that's why you'll see a lot of the savings we're having have been reinvested in the district. As you can imagine, we have had several areas of savings since the school closure. We've had obviously decreased overtime, mainly within facilities, so we have not had a lot of the overtime or the substitute coverage. Within regular ed and special education, we have had savings for not having to fill the daily substitutes. So that would be bring in daily subs as well as the paraprofessional coverage. We've also had open positions that we have not filled due to, as Jen mentioned, the place where we send people for physicals was closed, and just hiring people in this time frame. We have looked at each position. So we have a custodial position open, a position within central office, as well as some paraprofessional positions that we strategically have not filled yet based upon what is going on. We also, within athletics mainly, we had also savings because we've had less transportation, athletic officials for spring sports being canceled. We also, through our latest MOA with the RTA, negotiated lower spring coach payments for all of the coaches, mainly to recognize work that had been done, but also acknowledging that the spring season did not occur. And as we had mentioned during the budget season and earlier, we also had savings in the athletic rentals, mainly due that we were able to keep a lot of the rates flat. We had anticipated an increase, and we also had less ice and pool time due to late start. While we did have a lot of these savings, we also did experience increases in other areas, mainly within all of our revolving accounts due to the lost revenue. So basically, all of our revolving accounts have seen a significant decrease in revenue since the school closure in March. As you know, we forgave 1 month of payment for full day K and RISE. Use of school properties, basically since March 13th, there have been no rentals, including recreation. So typically we would have recreation payments coming in as well, but we have not rented out any of the space for that. For the extended day, with the school closure of March 13th, we had no payments since then. For athletics, the spring season also did not occur, so we did not get the student fees in for that. And as we had mentioned before, for the Parker musical, unfortunately, they took it to the goalpost and were not able to kick it through, so they did all of the rehearsals, but the show did not happen. And we did have many parents asking for refunds, so we did have to refund a lot of the ticket sales, or we're in the process of working through that because the show did not occur. So we've had some increases and some decreases. So I've done a lot of the tables that I've done in the past to show the salary savings, savings within special education, and this year, I have to give a huge shout out. Jen Sties and I have spent a considerable amount of time, and all of the work that we had done with Sharon Stewart last year is we are in better shape than we had anticipated with our consulting, legal, out-of-district tuition, as well as transportation. So we have had savings in those areas, but we are right now monitoring very closely for any additional tutoring services that we're incurring right now due to the school closure. So we're working, like I said, we meet every Friday for at least an hour or two to go line item by line item, student by student. You will see within the other expenses that is a deficit, because what we have been doing is reallocating a lot of the savings to reinvest in technology, to reinvest in curriculum. We also have put in here allocating money within the health services, so the nurses area, because we did have savings due to less substitutes as well as hiring, that we are going to be purchasing as much PPE as we can in the current year. And we are also looking to transfer funds into the facilities area, because as Dr. Doherty mentioned, early indications are that PPE is going to be a very big endeavor going forward. We are very fortunate. We're working very closely right now with the town. Finance Committee did allocate money in the current year, and there is funding in next year, but we do feel it is very prudent, to the best of our ability, to buy as much of the items that don't have a shelf life as possible this year. We are receiving early indications that pricing will increase and supplies will decrease in the not too distant future as more and more people start to try to purchase this. So that's why we're looking to do some of the transfers that we are. The other area that we had talked about, and I did include a high-level summary in here. Again, we're still working through making sure we have all final invoices, all collections are done, refunds are processed. We did also put a chart in here with what we anticipate the revolving accounts may look like at the end of this year, as well as a really rough estimate for next year. We will need to continue to review mainly next year, because depending what happens with the schools, when they open, how they open, each one of these has a completely different story as to how it would be impacted. But as we had mentioned earlier on, we are going to request that the offsets in the current year be reduced, taking into account the lost revenue, the refunds, as well as to ensure we are positioning ourselves as best we can going into next year to preserve next year's offsets as well. But I will say, looking at the balances, there aren't any that we're looking to increase or have significant balances for. Really, every single one of these is going down pretty drastically over this year and next year, and we really don't know, free and reduced next year, if we can even have shows. Obviously, we may not have as many stipends, but again, until we see how the year plays out, it's really difficult to see what next year may look like. The other item, I do anticipate having another update in June where I would look to do the same. To the extent we have extra funds, would be to transfer them where they'll make the biggest impact to the district while preserving next year's budget as much as we can. So hopefully it's a lot of information all at once, and my 2-page memo became a 5-page memo due to COVID-19. That's my new tagline. I'm blaming everything on COVID-19.
Thank you. Excellent. Any questions from the committee? Tom?
Hi, Gail. Thank you for
Hi,
this.
Tom.
You were probably expecting me to ask a few questions.
I was disappointed it took so long for you to raise your hand.
I don't want to disappoint. My first thing is reading through this. I'm quite excited about some of the changes that are happening because they've been asked about for quite some time. But I'm also my ears go up when I see some of these as well. So maybe this is also Dr. Stives can answer the first one here. And Chuck, apologies, but I have a few questions. So
Sure.
On page 41 of the packet, on the special education line, it says projected surplus savings reflects salary savings related to staff turnover and timing of paraprofessionals. I know that's relatively standard, but my standard question also has to be asked, do we have any services that we need to do compensation for or anything else like that as a result of not having staff to fulfill any tasks that were necessary according to IEPs?
So Gail, do you want me to jump in on that
I
one
was just gonna
first?
say, I can start and say part of it, Tom, is sometimes it's a difference in the rates at which the outgoing person and the incoming person was, timing of when we fill the positions, and oftentimes we have extra para dollars for teacher coverage as well, so if that's not all being used, that goes into salary savings as well, but Jen can talk about the services piece. Oh, and she's outside for the sunset.
Just for our school committee chair, I came outside for the sunset. No, so we've been very careful about compensatory services and making sure that we were able to cover everything. And during this closure, we've been working closely with the families on our continuation of learning plans, and any students that may need additional services because of the closure. We'll be meeting with those families when we return to school. So we're trying to really be thoughtful and make sure we don't owe anything due to staff being out or any absences.
Okay,
Thanks, Jen.
thank you. Now, my next question quickly here is part of the savings, I guess, seems to be able to be used to pay for uniforms for band and sports.
I thought you would like that, Tom.
Which, yes, considering it's been 30 years since we were able to buy band uniforms, I'm quite happy about. But can you talk a little bit about the estimates there, if we have any yet, if we have to go out for bid, and as well, what sports we're able to cover?
Yep, I definitely can. Let me just get to that. So we have included in that is field hockey, which we do have quotes for. That's relatively inexpensive. It's about $5,200. For football, we do have 3 quotes that we received, which the low quote right now is about $24,800. We'll do a more formal. This was sort of, we reached out and got 3 quotes. And for the bands, the original information I had received was about $35,000. So those were the amounts. And the reason, in talking to Tom Zaya and talking to Dr. Doherty, is in looking at the savings within athletics, I felt it was appropriate if I had savings within athletics to reinvest it within the athletics program, knowing that the next couple of years are most likely going to be tight, where we would not have sort of this opportunity to do it. So the fact that I had savings with the coaches, with the transportation, with the facilities, I felt it was prudent to keep it within that cost center and reinvest it in the program it was originally budgeted for. So that it was a thought out plan. I could have moved it somewhere else, but I felt it was appropriate to reinvest it back into the program.
Okay, thank you very much. It's good to hear we've got estimates already. I think, just as a note, I had heard 45,000 for the band, but maybe a new estimate had come in. That's better. Either one, it's somewhat of a, I hate to say it, a rounding error in the greater scheme of things right now. But my next question, or my next set of questions, really, looking at the revolving fund accounts. In particular, I'm alarmed that the extended day number is going to go down to 180,000 at the end of this year, and I'm wondering about the projected revenue, if that's related to the expectation that we're going to have to raise rates to repopulate that account, or what are we looking at in that space?
So I can walk through a couple of things for the extended day. So for the current year, I will say 3 things happened. It was the perfect storm for extended day. So as folks know, in order to reduce the wait list, we went out to bid to bring in third-party providers. This was the year we said, okay, let's maximize that, figure out the staffing equations. We knew we would be utilizing part of the extended day balance, which is what we always wanted to do, was to start to bring that balance down. Unfortunately, what also happened, so we had heavy utilization of the outside vendors while we were looking through our staffing to get the wait list down. COVID happened. Everything ceased, so all of the revenue stopped coming in effective March 13th. As a district, we made the determination to keep our staff on payroll because we did not know how long it was going to last. So we had heavy reliance on outside providers. Revenue stopped coming in on March 13th. We paid all of the program folks through May 8th. We did make the difficult decision to furlough them effective May 8th because at that point, obviously, we knew that the schools were not going to close and we were not going to reopen this year, and we wanted to make sure we had given folks enough notice on that. There are 4 individuals we are continuing to pay, and those are the 4 office people that are continuing to help with refunds, help getting the invoices done. We're also relooking at the RFP process to decide if we're going to roll contracts or go back out to bid for next year. So that sort of explains why the balance went down as much as it did this year and why we're actually asking the offsets to be reduced this year. For next year, the revenue number we have in there, Tom, is actually based upon current registrations we have. So we know how many folks registered. So that's an actual number if the moon and stars align, schools open, extended day works, and everybody stays the way they are. What we have put in place, I've worked very closely with Chris Nelson and Chris Kelly to make sure we're thinking strategically long-term to say, okay, if schools don't open and that revenue is not coming in, we have to start making decisions day one on our external vendors as well as staffing to make sure everything's getting balanced out. So relatively long-winded, but I needed to give you the history for this year to go into next year. Did that help?
It does, but I guess just to clarify, we have all those registrations, but the rate is going to stay basically the same. We're not raising the rate on anybody.
Correct. We decided what we would do. So originally, Tom, the plan had been, this was the first year, Chris had just started, we just did the third parties.
Yep.
In the spring, the goal was to reassess the entire program, look at the costs, look at the fees, and say, okay, do we need to increase or decrease fees? We don't feel we have enough good revenue right now because I don't have a full solid year under our belt. We also felt that, I'm going to be cautious about how I answer this. For fees next year, we also felt now might not be the best time to start increasing, I'm going to say this, baseline fees.
Yeah.
I am not going to take off the table that there may or may not have to be additional fees we have to look at depending what the state comes out at. I don't want to quote what the dentists are doing, but I'm going to quote what some other industries may or may not be doing, where if we have to now start to outfit people with PPE and different cleaning and a different model, we may have to assess the cost of the program on nothing else but the fact that those costs are driving it up. I don't feel we're in a position yet to say, taking that off the table, we would have a fee increase, because we need to have a little bit more data about how a full year would look with the new structure of staffing and third-party vendors. Because I feel if you make a change, you don't want to be increasing and decreasing your rates every year. I think that that's challenging for families.
Okay, thank you. I agree. I just always wanted to make that clear because I'm sure there are people watching wondering the same thing.
Which is why I wanted to be careful about the, I can't guarantee.
Yeah, exactly. I totally understand that. One more question, and then I'll pass the mic to whoever else has a question, and that's the full-day kindergarten end-of-year number for this year. Yep. I think it might be the lowest I've seen it since I've been tracking for the last 5 or 6 years. Maybe somewhere in that range. Usually it's up to the 900,000 to 1.2 million, give or take. Mm-hmm. Given where we're going next year with reduced enrollment and other things along those lines, given the fact that we don't even know if we're going to be able to be in school, and what that might mean for people completely unenrolling from full day K, if that were to be the case. And this might be, I need to ask this question in a way that I don't know that I get any of us in trouble, right, as well, is with the 335,000, is it possible that we take a greater offset or reduce the offset in a greater level so that the number can go up to $750,000 instead of $647,000 in that revolving fund. I'm just trying to prepare for the rainy day of next year a little bit and think how we're going to pay those teachers if we don't have full day tuition coming in at all next year.
Valid question. I was trying to balance sort of both sides of that equation. But that is up for discussion with, obviously I would need to sort of go back and look at where I could take it from other areas, because I would, if we wanted to reduce it further, I would just need to take it from other expenses somewhere else. The seesaw approach. But it's also, I was also, in full disclosure, I am very sensitive to a lot of the questions we get about having too much money within those, and it's not really supposed to be a rainy day fund. So there's been a lot of pushback, very rightly so, people challenging it, whether it's this committee, which we appreciate the questions, finance committee, town meeting, that there's a lot of focus on having too high of a balance in the revolving account. So it is a very delicate balance there, because the concept also is if the amounts are declining, the balance in the fund should also be declining, if that makes sense. So I tried to balance both of those, and we have reduced the offset for next year in the proposed budget that you saw as part of the last meeting, as well as finance committee, as I was trying to do some this year and some next year.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, and I totally understand where those questions have come from. We've all seen them. We've all heard them. I guess the last one on this one, and I think I've asked this before. I think the answer is no. So maybe it's something for this committee to think about.
I hope I say it nicer than that.
Well, the question was, do we have a guideline yet in terms of how much do we want to keep in the revolving account? Do we want to keep a year's worth of expenses, half a year's worth of expenses? Is there something that we should think about as a committee from a guideline perspective that helps us in those conversations, protects us in those conversations, but also helps to keep them at the right level so they don't get too big, they don't balloon out of control?
And I do agree with that. I think I will say, can I blame COVID again? That was on the target for it this year, that we wanted to really do a lot more of that. I think with redoing the budget and this and a lot of the stuff on the transportation and trying to unravel where we were, it just was not something in full disclosure that we were able to devote as much time. But I agree. I think that is a good topic that we should have. Some of them are very, very prescribed as to what can and cannot remain within them, and others it's not as clear. But I do agree that would be a worthwhile exercise, as well as revisiting the fees for extended day.
And don't sell yourself short. There's been a lot of work done on that already. So
I've been a little busy.
Yeah, no one's been asleep at the switch on that. On my question on the are you all set, Tom? Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I'm good. Thanks, Chuck.
Gail, on the revenues that you projected for 21, can you just walk through the full day kindergarten revenue again?
Yes, so what I did for the full day kindergarten is we have preliminary numbers of enrollment. So
Right.
I looked at that number, which is down from,
Right.
It's down from what we originally budgeted. It's also down from sort of where we thought we would be. I also have preliminary numbers for those students that are being recommended for full day K through, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, the IEP process. So if they are recommended for full day kindergarten, they do not have to, there is no fee associated with that. And I also assumed we would have a slight uptick in the number of free and reduced. So it's really a combination of lower enrollment, students on IEPs, as well as an estimate for free and reduced, because we do not know, but given what we're seeing and the number of families that are participating in the lunch program, I do anticipate that there will be more families that will submit and potentially qualify for free and reduced. So I didn't want to be too aggressive in how much I thought. I would rather have a slightly lower revenue and be pleasantly surprised than have a much higher expectation and have the opposite happen.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then the other question on the revenues I had was on the use of school property, and I think you hit on some of that, but does that, are you factoring in that, you know, the new normal might be that we can't rent and you have our property used as much?
I do. I'm basically assuming the summer is gone, that we won't have that. I'm hopeful that recreation will start again. Some of the big items that really impacted us this year, robotics was big. Robotics is one of our biggest rentals that we do, and unfortunately that got canceled. And then a lot of the sports that happen in the spring that we rent out for. So I did discount that. Part of what's helpful is obviously if I'm not renting, some of the custodial expenses also are sort of a natural offset. As we talked about during the finance committee meetings, we worked very closely with the town manager, and we have agreed to decrease the offsets we send to the town to cover some of the utilities and maintenance costs for next year. We're going to honor the offsets for this year, but we're decreasing them for next year. So we were able to factor that in as well. But this is another area that I would anticipate we may need to come back to the committee to come up with a methodology and or potential fee that we would have to tack on to bills depending upon what our requirements are for cleaning, for PPE, for coverage for some of the larger scale rentals if they're allowed to happen. Because I think the costs will become prohibitive for some of these events.
Thank you. John Parks?
Thank you. Gail, as far as, you know, we've done the furlough for extended day. Are we looking at any additional furloughs for the remainder of the year? Food services, things like that to...
Currently, we are not. So all of the staff, so obviously all of those in the operating budget, we have assignments. They are working for food services. We do still have folks as needed coming in to help with food distribution, to help with cleaning out the kitchens. So we are trying to utilize, but we made the decision and we have reviewed the revolving account that they are fully self-contained within the food services revolving account. So we do not have to take any of that onto the operating budget. Danielle and I have been working very closely, and even with everything that's happened, because that program runs so smoothly, we're able to cover it, and we'll probably still have 2 months worth of revenue in the bank at the end of the year to start next year. And we'll probably at the next meeting start to have discussions about what the summer might look like for that program. But that would have been the only other group we would have considered, but we were able to work that one within it, especially since we are still feeding students during this time period.
Thank you.
Gail, I just had with the, you know, all the COVID-19, has there been any changes or what's the word I'm looking for? Any leeway given to the criteria that you need to use for scholarships or free, and you know, when with athletic fees and things like that?
There hasn't been. We will still be using, so for right now, the only leeway we did have is that DESE and DOD did come out and say for feeding students. No longer ask if they're free and reduced. If somebody shows up, you feed them. We don't even have to track names anymore. We just track accounts. So with food insecurity where it is, they wanted to make sure there were no hindrances. So we are able to get reimbursed for every meal we are providing, regardless of free and reduced status, which was huge because that would have been a big obstacle for folks. The guidelines and how that works, I haven't heard that they're changing it, but they did say not to ask people to fill out the forms yet because they didn't want people to panic to think we wouldn't be able to feed them. So from what my sense is right now, the application process, the direct certs and everything will work the same way, and I haven't heard that they're changing any of the income levels or anything like that. But the way we've always handled it is the free and reduced automatically goes to the food services because that's what it was originally geared for. And then if the parents allow us to share the data, obviously confidentially, we then can apply it to any other fee-based program. So it would be applied to RISE, full day K, athletics, and extracurricular. So we honor it across the board for that. And then there is always the option if there is a financial situation, because what can happen is based upon how some of these work, they're due at the beginning of the year. If your situation changes, we do have the safeguard that they can write a letter to the superintendent. Each one is assessed and decisions can be made to grant exceptions on an as-needed basis.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was getting at. I mean, so you can look at stuff in real time as opposed to historical, because a lot of people's lives changed overnight, obviously.
Yeah, and we would continue to do that, where if they don't follow the perfect path, we do have a safeguard in place that we would assess each one individually as situations arise.
Thank you. Erin?
So mine is more of a clarification because I just wasn't sure if I heard you correctly in the beginning, but regarding the surplus that we have right now, the 355, were you saying that we'll revisit that in June and determine how best to spend it before June 30th? Okay.
Yes. What I try to do, a lot of you guys are, so probably it's Chuck who's left that knows, I tend to be very conservative and I don't like to commit until I'm really certain. So I'm basically rerunning another projection now that we just had another payroll. I just met with everyone to look through invoices. So we'll go through, we'll look at prepaying tuitions, we'll go through all of that. And then once we have sort of a more solid number, I would come back one more time in June and say, okay, here's how I would like to transfer, move the funds so that you don't have money trapped somewhere. Does that
great? That's how I thought I understood it, but I just wanted to clarify and be sure. So I appreciate that.
What I try to avoid is moving money and then coming back to you and having to move it back. So I tend to do this one and then we'll do some additional ones in June.
Plus, by then we'll have even more guidance about things we're going to need for next year. So.
Exactly.
We hope.
Tom?
So just to follow up on that and following up on my question about the kindergarten revolving account, in your professional and expert opinion, would you prefer for us to wait for any adjustments to what you're asking for until June?
I would.
You can come back with something else in June if necessary?
Yes, because what I can do is if I know that that is an area the committee has pause about, as I'm going through it, I can factor that in and not commit resources elsewhere and look to do that. So that would be one approach to that.
Anyone else? Excellent, thank you. And you're still on deck here.
Oh, actually, I think we get to vote.
Still, Chuck.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
Oh, otherwise I can't do anything.
So I've got a bunch of motions to read here, so I'll start with them one by one, Chuck.
No, you just have two, Tom.
What's that?
You just have two.
I have 2 budget transfer motions and the offset motions.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought you were going to hold on the offset ones.
No, I was saying hold on any adjustment to the offset
Got it. Got it.
So thank you for clarifying, Dr. Doherty. So the first budget transfer motion is I move to transfer $10,000 to the Administrative Cost Center from the Special Education Cost Center.
is there a second?
I'll second, Gavin.
Okay, all those in favor, Carla,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Okay,
The second one is I move to transfer $75,000 to the Facilities Cost Center from the Special Education Cost Center.
Second. Carla.
seconded by Carla. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Aaron,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Carla,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Okay, thank you. Tom?
The last one is, I'm assuming there's no further discussion on any of the offsets, so I'm going to make one motion covering all the offsets. And that is, I move to reduce the offsets as outlined by CFO Gail Dowd.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Aaron,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Carla,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Okay, thank you, Gail. But you are still up.
Oh, all right. Well, this is only a one-page memo, so hopefully it'll be a lot shorter. So I wanted to give the committee an update and also our recommendations regarding transportation. So as we had talked about, it feels like years ago, but I guess it was only 2 months ago, there has been a lot of guidance and suggestions regarding how to handle all of the services that suddenly stopped being provided when the schools closed down. I would say so we have very few contracts. So just to give a little context, we have our cleaning contract, but we have had the cleaners in every day since the school has closed. So we did not have any issues or concerns with the cleaning contractors because obviously they are helping us get all the buildings ready. So the two other areas were transportation and out-of-district tuition. What became readily apparent is that what we wanted to ensure is that we were going to be in a situation that when schools opened, all of these providers were still available and ready to basically flip the switch and start providing the services they always had. I'm happy to report that I will say I'm going to say 99.9% there with the legislation. The House passed a version, the Senate passed a version with minor changes. So it's sort of going back and forth between the two of them, but we do anticipate that it's going to pass that adjusted Mass General law that would actually allow these payments to occur. So that was one of the big hurdles we had, is that the law itself did not allow us to do that. So we did get that information, and again, we do anticipate that the final passed version should be out any day now. We have worked very closely with SEAM. So we have two contracts that we're working with. SEAM, which is contracted with NRT for all of our special ed transportation. And really what we have been focused on is negotiating with the vendors, taking into account costs that they have to maintain during the shutdown, taking into account any support they're going to get from any of the CARES Act funding. And really what we want to ensure is that they are keeping all of their staff on payroll during this period, because the concern is if any of our providers take their buses off the road, let their staffing go, that if ESY goes brick and mortar, Jen will shoot me for saying that, if ESY is brick and mortar for any part of it, school starts again at the end of August, if they have let all of their bus drivers go and taken all of their buses off the road, they're not going to be positioned to help us out. So we all went into this, and it's been a very collaborative approach where everyone using the same vendor has worked together, so we're all getting the same rates from the same vendor. So we also did that early on. SEAM created a subcommittee that myself and Dr. Doherty were part of it to go through and negotiate the rates. So the SEAM contract, which I believe their board approved it this week, we also needed to make sure the SEAM board approved it before we could bring it to our committee. We have negotiated a 78% rate from school closing to the end of the year. For our regular ed buses, again, it's a smaller contract, smaller vendor, so the costs tend to be a little bit different. We have negotiated a 70% rate, and that is both for our regular education buses, day buses only. We did not factor in athletics or extracurricular because those are above and beyond, as well as our METCO buses. The METCO grant itself has come out and said that they fully support and anticipate and expect districts to be paying the providers, because again, when school starts at the end of August, if we do not have buses to pick these METCO students up, we cannot get them to the district. So we were in close contact with our METCO contacts as well, and they basically have been pushing for day one for districts to pay for these. So we are recommending that the committee support and approve the 78% for NRT and the 70% for North Suburban, and it does have a sunset as of June 30th. So we're only paying for the maximum number of days in the contract, and we will be ensuring we get all of the support from them for any funding they receive back to make sure that it's getting allocated properly and that they're keeping their staff on payroll.
So, well, thanks, Gail. So we'll have a motion and then discuss.
So Chuck, we have two motions, so I'll start with the first one. We can discuss that, and then I'll do the second one. So the first motion is a motion to approve the renegotiated terms of the regular day / METCO transportation contracts with North Suburban Transportation at a reduced rate of 70%.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sean. So Gail, I know you've probably talked about this in terms of, I'll just say it. This to me is like extortion. With, we have to pay, because if you don't pay, we're going to let our people go. It's just, and then I can't guarantee you. But I'm just thinking down the road, is there going to be any takeaways from this in terms of how to deal with these vendors next time around?
I think this was sort of an interesting lesson. I will say that one of the items, which, thank you for asking that, one of the other items that I should have brought up is for the SEAM contract. We have also negotiated 0% increase next year. There should have been an increase in next year's rates. We, as part of this negotiation, renegotiated next year's contracts to keep the rates flat. So we did sort of try to say, okay, we get it, but we're going to play ball that's a horrible way to say that. We're going to come to the table prepared as well. So, and for us, with over $1 million of transportation, flat is very nice going into a tough budget year. So we did look at that. We have one more year under our current contract. Next year's our last year in the current contract for North Suburban, but I would imagine we'd be having similar conversations. So we did try to look to the future as well and say, we understand that this, and then obviously I think contractually going forward, the negotiations will be interesting. And it is, I don't think it's going to be a shock for people. It is a relative monopoly of, there's not a lot of providers out there.
Thank you. Sorry for going off the rails.
No, I don't disagree. But I need to make sure at the end of the day, I was preserving the fact that I have to get kids to and from where they need to go. And the last thing I want is to be that district that the kids are on the corner with no bus. That would not be well.
Aaron?
I didn't raise my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tom, I'm sorry.
No, that was from the previous conversation as well, Chuck. I just was asking us to make sure we have our live feed following the speaker, because the live feed is not yet following the speaker.
You just don't want the spotlight, Tom.
Or maybe I don't want the spotlight.
If protecting Gail, yeah, I don't know. But
Okay, so there's no other questions on that? Okay, we're ready to vote on the motion. Aaron?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Tom?
aye.
Carla?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Okay, we're ready for the next motion.
Okay, the second motion is move to approve the renegotiated terms of the special education transportation contract with North Reading Transportation at a reduced rate of 78%.
Second?
Second, Carla.
Okay, any discussion on this one? Okay, seeing none. Tom?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Thank you, Gail.
Great. Thank you for your support on these. And with that,
Okay,
I'm done.
Yes. Now we are going to have a discussion on scheduling a retreat. This was for to have collaboration with the district improvement plan discussion for next year. Dr. Doherty, did you have anything you wanted to say before we started that? Or?
No, my understanding, and I wasn't at the July meeting.
Yep.
My understanding is that we would come forward with some suggested areas for the committee to consider prior to us starting to develop the specifics of the district improvement plan.
Right. And as I mentioned, and as we talked about at the meeting last summer, Tom and John were there. It's better probably to do that as a retreat format, just rather than try to crowd it into an agenda with other items. I would like to be able to do that in person. I'm thinking like a Saturday morning or something in the either late summer, early fall. I don't know what other thoughts are on the committee.
Chuck, do you want to just have a free-flowing conversation now as
Yeah.
opposed to raising hand?
Sure. Yes.
I would agree with that, and maybe we can use the DESE, graduation date as a anchor point to have our conversation. Where we can have outdoor graduations theoretically starting I think it's July
19th.
18th.
19th. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's some, we have to be a little bit flexible to this because we'll want to make sure we can attend the graduation too and all that kind of fun stuff. But this is likely to be maybe a morning event, and the graduation is likely to be an evening event under the lights or something else like that is what, we may end up doing. So, I was thinking, somewhere in the range of July 25th, August 1st, somewhere in that range, not going too late because we're going to have to get time to adjust for it and plan for it to have the conversation late August, early September. But also making sure that we can do it, like you said, in person. I think doing it in person will be very valuable and opens up a lot of means of gathering feedback. Whether that's stickies on a wall, a big poster chart, whatever else the case may be, to gather that feedback, bring ideas to the table, and then coalesce to an agreed understanding. I'm also on board with having it in person if at all possible, and those dates seemed reasonable given the current guidance we have available.
Okay, anybody else?
Chuck, can you explain or just define who is attending this meeting?
So obviously, definitely the school committee and the central office leadership team, and I guess then from there we'd have to figure out. Dr. Dory and I talked a little bit about this earlier in the week, and that may be it. I mean, I don't know whether we need to ask the principals to come out. We've never done that. It's always been the central office leadership team, Chris and Gail and Jen and John and that group, and with the school committee, just to kind of brainstorm together. What I'd envision is they would have possibly met with the building leadership and anybody else, and bring that feedback to the meeting. Is that, John, is that how you?
I just caution, whatever date you're going to choose, if you choose a Saturday during the summer, you're not going to have full participation of central office staff, either. So I just want to caution.
Is it at all a possibility of including the principals in this exercise? Because I think that would be wonderful.
I'm not sure that, again, I think it's because it's a summer Saturday that.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's fair to be asking for principals to coming in the summer on a Saturday.
Chuck, is it a possibility of doing this on a weekday?
Yeah, I mean,
Or a week,
that's why we're having that's why we're having the discussion. I just threw the Saturday out. It doesn't have to be a Saturday. It could be a weekday too, or a weeknight where that's the only thing we do.
Yeah, I mean,
I would think we would want to aim for maximum attendance and participation. So whatever will work for the majority.
Okay.
I mean, I would, to Aaron's point, nobody's going to require, but I think optionally, if they're interested and want to join, I'd love the feedback as well. I mean, they're on the ground, working through all the stuff that, we're putting out there as goals. I'm sure they have some ideas. Yes, I'm sure a lot of that can come through already with some of the previous conversations, but, sometimes just being in the room, that perspective is very important. The proverbial room, right? And whether we do it at, a single night, I'm expecting this not to be, a half an hour or an hour. I'm expecting it to be 4 to 5 hours of time, concentrated, focused, working it through, And we may not even be done that first time, really, frankly, either, if we're having that discussion in a detailed fashion. But if we wanted to do like a Thursday night or a Tuesday night or a Monday night, I'm not opposed to that either. I just want to make sure that we're level setting ourselves from a timeline perspective, that it might be a 6 to 11 night or something like that. Obviously, people can bow out whenever they want to, whenever they need to. We need to maintain quorum, obviously, but anything else, I think it's what we want here is a collaborative conversation and discussion. At least that's what I want.
I'd actually agree. I'd like to see as many participate as possible, even opening up that spot to extended day with the principals.
Okay.
So then, Chuck, do you think it would make sense to put on, a primary target date and then a backup date, as things to put on the outside there in the calendar, just in case something happens? Maybe separated by a couple weeks in case DSE guidance pushes things out a little bit. Anybody else, I'm curious for that feedback, but I think, it probably makes sense for us to set a date, target that date, and then if we need to adjust, we have a backup plan already in place.
Yeah, well, I'll come back to you or to the committee with a couple of dates in the end of July and sometime in August, weeknight dates or weekday, whatever. Yeah.
Chuck, could we not use like the town used the other days? They sent out a doodle asking for availability. I know Sean and I both got it for.
I'm sorry. What? I'm sorry. I didn't. Would you say that?
It's a doodle. It's basically a calendar sync that allows people to see when people are available.
Chuck, I can help you with that. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's the right idea.
For
and
trying to
I
get
can
people
help you
on
with
the
it.
same
Yeah.
date. Yes.
Yep.
Well, anything
Got the
that,
right idea. We'll
that's
get you through it.
anything that's referred to as doodle, I don't take that seriously. But
I didn't name it. I just think it might be a beneficial tool.
We got your back, Chuck.
yeah.
Chuck, where were you envisioning this taking place?
The superintendent's conference room or something equivalent. I guess with social distancing, that may not be big enough if we have to do that. So maybe the library, that meeting room, that's bigger. Or I guess when I say the library, I mean the town library, not the high school library.
You would have to do it in a place where you have RCTV access, which would be the library here at the high school would be your best approach. It's also air conditioned.
Yeah.
That would be nice. I mean, I think the other thing is this is technically a public
Yes, it is.
retreat. So theoretically, anybody else could join. So we need to make sure that we have appropriate space for that and plan for it to a degree as well, just in case we get, 2, 3, 4, 10, parents or other community members that would want to join in as well.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. More to follow on that. We are now on to, so it's 9:28. What time do we run?
You have an hour and you have approximately an hour and a half.
Okay.
Chuck, may I suggest that we go ahead and do the public comment reading now, so we're not rushing up against it in case the social media stuff takes a little while, and that way we make sure we get it out of we make sure we execute it and hear the public appropriately.
Sure. I have to check it. I haven't been in there.
I have 3 that have come in since we started the meeting, or right around the time we started the meeting. If you want me to read them, I can read them. If somebody else wants to read them, that's
Yeah,
fine,
why
too.
don't we, so the first one I got that came in was from Bob, the town manager. Is that what you have?
That's the second one. I have one right before that, right before the meeting started, from Heather Lombardo.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Heather. So why don't you read that one? Go ahead. Yeah.
Should we not be going back to the ones we missed last meeting? Or is it okay that they're just printed in the packet?
We responded to those.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, and they are in the packet, so, yeah, we should definitely make an effort to make sure we read these each time, though, and last time that's why I wanted to make sure we did it now, as opposed to...
Yeah, that was one time we missed it. You know, I'm not falling on the sword, I mean, it happened. You know, it's not gonna happen again, so...
Nobody's blaming you, my friend. We all ran up against that time frame, so... All right, so, an email from Heather Lombardo, titled Remote Learning Platform. Dear School Committee and Dr. Doherty, as a teacher at RMHS, I've been frustrated with Microsoft Teams as a synchronous learning platform for video, like pretty much everyone else. I understand Zoom is coming, but the communication on the timeline for its rollout needs to be much clearer and more transparent. Teachers are frustrated, and they deserve a much more accurate understanding of how soon things will happen than some very vague notes like soon or in the near future, etc. More importantly, however, is my question for next year. This question has yet to be addressed by anyone in the many hours of Teams training I attended a few weeks ago. Is the district going to consolidate and require all teachers to use the same platform for online assignments, not just video conferencing? Is that platform Teams? I think it's absolutely, as students should not be expected to log onto multiple platforms. Google Classroom, Teams, Portal do different teachers' assignments. This is not fair to students, parents, or teachers. There should be one platform that every teacher is required to use, and there should be required paid training on this platform. Most of the issues other teachers are having at this point with online learning are due to the fact that teachers have been allowed to use whatever they've wanted for online learning and assignments, and little to no paid training has been provided. I urge the district to consolidate and require a platform. I also urge them to use a different platform than Teams, but frankly, that is less important to me than requiring everyone to use the same platform. Thank you for consideration. Heather Lombardo, RMHS English teacher.
Okay. I can read the next one. It's from the town manager, Bob LaSure. Good evening. Just a quick thank you on behalf of the many town employees that have worked with Dr. Doherty over the many years on a wide variety of issues. We have faced more challenges than any of us could imagine. I'm very proud of how in every instance we were able to work as a team for the betterment of the district and the community. Best wishes, John. Carl, you want to take the next one from Jeffrey Coram?
I actually don't have that.
Or do I?
I think that might be just for you, Chuck.
Yes, it is. It was on an agenda item. I'll respond to him. Carl, you want to take Linda Doxter's?
Sure. Thank you for this. This is from Linda Snow Doxter. Thank you for this opportunity to give public input. I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Doherty. I have known him in each of his different roles in Reading over the last 20 years of his 32 years. I first met him when he was a science teacher registered for a program for which I was an evaluator. Even back in 1990, he was determined to provide the best education possible for his students. The program focused on alternative methods of evaluating science learning. It has been an honor to work with him since then in the RPS, from the School Advisory Council at Coolidge to organizing programs in social emotional learning and Holocaust education, to the Human Relations Advisories Committee, ARCASA, the school committee, in each program as well as through his involvement with the state organizations. Dr. Doherty has advocated for and collaborated with others to meet the needs and rights of every child. Through multiple override campaigns and budget cycles, he has been creative, straightforward, transparent, always present, and committed to what was best for the education of every child, as well as what was right for our Reading community. Despite the negative on social media, he stayed focused on what he and his team felt was best for the children, listened to feedback, adjusted his decisions when appropriate, collaborated with town leadership, and always worked to support his staff. He is always quick to acknowledge the work of all of those working around him, and they and he deserve all of those accolades. I want to publicly thank him for devoting his educational experience, countless hours at whole heart to our kids and our town throughout all sorts of challenging times. Thank you, Dr. Doherty. We wish you a productive and less stressful final year here at Reading and a wonderful retirement afterwards. With appreciation, Linda Snowdoxer, Beaver Road.
Thank you. Okay. Guess that did anyone see any other public comment? I didn't. Okay.
Not today. No.
Thank you. I did get an email from Jeffrey Corum. It was it's a question on the offsets, but he says he's going to resend it. So when we get it, I'll make sure everyone's aware of it, because it wasn't attached. So, all right, time for the discussion on the social media policy. So we had started this. I'm trying to remember now. I guess last summer. Sound right, Tom? And so I'm gonna. So the first thing we're gonna do is this will be the first reading of a policy. So Tom will start by reading the policy, and then someone could make a motion to suspend the reading. Then we'll go into our discussion. So, ready, Tom?
I'm ready as I'll ever be. So there's two policies for tonight. So I'll start the first one, and then somebody can suspend, and we'll start the second one. So file BHE, use of electronic messaging by school committee members. As elected public officials, school committee members shall exercise.
John Parks raised his hand. Okay.
Yeah, I move to suspend the reading.
That's a roll call vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Carla?
Nay.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. So that was 5-1, Linda. Okay. So, Tom, I asked Tom to kind of take this presence because he's worked closely with Colby in putting all this together. So, go ahead, Tom. Did you want to share that?
Yeah, I can share it, but do you want me to read the second policy before we start going through the rest of the conversation?
All right, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Yes. Go ahead.
So the second policy, file BHEA, use of social media by school committee members. While the school committee believes that communication via open meetings, inclusive of public comment.
Mr. Brandt moves that we suspend the reading. Aaron?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to try to share my information here, and then I'll talk through a little bit of stuff, and we'll come back to it. Can everybody see that? The background memo?
Yep.
Okay.
You may want to increase the size of the
Yep.
font.
That's a good point. Thank you, sir. Especially for those of you watching at home, and I'll even minimize that because we don't need it for now. So I'm not going to read through the background memo, but I will talk through a little bit of the history of where we've been and what we've done on this process. So, as Chuck referred, last fall we started this process in the attempt, as the drafter, of putting in place a process by which this committee can actively, but correctly and carefully, participate in responding to social media, inclusive of creating our own appropriate pages, whether that's a Twitter profile, a Facebook page, things along those lines. We ran into a few fits and starts along that process, and essentially, with some of the feedback, I went back to the drawing board and also reached out to various different bodies to make sure we were in alignment and doing the right thing. So one of the questions that was raised during one of our last meetings was whether or not we can letter our policies however we want to. And the answer to that question is generally yes, we can letter it whatever we want to, but there's a best practice. And essentially the best practice of that is that every letter in sequence is an indent as you go down a policy tree. So in this case, BHE is a certain level of indentation. When you go down the next level, a subordinate policy or policy underneath that, you add, and it usually starts with A and goes B, C, D, E. And there's a national school committee type process that this kind of follows. It's almost like the Dewey Decimal System. So that was one thing, that was one of the takeaways. Another one of the conversation points from last fall was whether or not we were going to have a social media policy and an electronic communication policy, or an individual one replacing the other, etc. The intent at the time was that we were having a new policy in addition to our old policy. And so when we did that, I went back and also clarified that as part of this process, but it did make me also go back and look at the BHE policy in particular, compare our version versus the MASC version that was out there, and then align them. In the process of doing so, in meeting with Colby on it, she adjusted that policy a little bit as well to remove some of the I'll just say esoteric language that was in there, and bring it up to date with where things are now, especially with regards to records retention and things along those lines. So the policy from a BHE perspective is updated principally to align with MASC, and then updated further by our legal counsel to clean it up a little bit and adjust the record retention documentation so that people didn't have to physically print emails and store them physically somewhere and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's the background there. And then we created the social media policy as it was, as it is, as you've seen it, to keep it as clean as possible, as straightforward as possible, but to be supported behind by the procedure protocol document. As a technicality of law, we have to vote to approve policies. We don't technically have to vote to approve procedures.
Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
any of the procedure documentation that we have, we can adjust, but we don't have to vote on it necessarily. It is expected that that is what we're going to try to do as a committee. That's how we're going to act, I guess would be the best way to say it. But it's not something we're voting on necessarily. So that's a little bit of the background there. Now the document in front here now is more of the legal background. I'm not going to go through it line upon line because by now you guys have all read it yourselves. You've seen all the case studies that are out there. I did take time to look again within the last couple of weeks, and there's no additional new case law out there around this. I'm using case law a little bit liberally because it's not technically you know, a Supreme Court ruling or anything else like that, but they are determinations of the Division of Open Government, and they do provide quite a bit of guidance and guidelines with regards to what is meant here. A couple of the key things that are of note would be the definition of deliberation, and it's oral or written communication, any medium, between or among a quorum of public body. So it has to be us, really, on any business within our jurisdiction. So we can talk all we want about the barbecue that happened. That doesn't matter. It's when we're talking about something in process that we will be deliberating on or having conversation of in public session that we have to be careful about. You know, then we talk a little bit more in terms of all the different rulings that are out there. And one of the key things I think many of you saw as you worked through this is the documentation. Almost every single Division of Open Government document, in terms of when it starts to do its determination, it redefines the open meeting law and it redefines the intent. And that's important from a legal and other study perspective, is what is the intent? And the intent of OML is very simple. It is to make sure that all of our discussions are public and nobody's having backdoor dealings. So if you think about it from that perspective, that's the vein in which we're trying to address this, while also following in line with some of the decisions that they put forward as guidelines and as best practices. So I'm going to stop sharing this for a minute, and I'm going to start sharing the first policy, which is the electronic communications policy. I'd like to, you know, pause when I share that, and if we want to edit it, I'd like to take it in a semi-ordered fashion of amendment, agreement, voting, etc., so we don't end up, you know, going into this what was agreed, what wasn't agreed, back and forth conversation, if that is amenable to the rest of the committee.
Yes.
Okay. So this version is the clean version. If anybody would like me to pull up the red line version, I can, but I believe you have it in your materials. And the essence of the changes here were to move some of the paragraphs around and to add in a few information pieces. So social media postings itself was added in as a greater, you know, understanding. The school committee members' use, etc. This was moved up. It used to be its own paragraph down here, if I remember right. It was moved up. It was the opinion of legal counsel that it just made sense to go there. And again, when you see some of the keywords there, between and among, that's part of the OML definition, and should not be used to discuss committee matters. And then the last major change that Colby did was to change the public records, in particular the retention. And we had quite a bit of discussion about that. And finally, we agreed on the language here that in accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts retention schedule for public records was the big change there. So nobody has to print anything out anymore or anything else like that, at least to stay compliant with our policy, whether we're doing that or not. I hope we weren't, actually. It's a lot of paper to print out. But this will mean that just our email server will serve in many cases as the record retention process place. So I'll pause there and open up for questions, feedback, amendments. Dr. Doherty, I'd like to hear from you if this causes any concern for you as well. And then we can go from there.
Tom, I have a question. This strikes me as more restrictive than what we could do verbally, right? You know, any two members could could discuss a matter under the board's jurisdiction. You know, obviously you've got to avoid serial communication, those sorts of things, but this policy suggests that suggests going beyond avoiding serial communication, and sort of avoiding any electronic discussion of matters under our jurisdiction altogether. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
It was the opinion of legal counsel that we should be very careful in all means along these lines. I'll just answer it that way. I would say there's no opinion here necessarily that we should be restricting ourselves any more than we would be a conversation necessarily. And that's where kind of the between and among starts to come in play. That's where the quorum concept starts to come in play. So you can certainly, if we look at the between and among portion here, that's that sentence, but it's implying in other sentences as well that that's the key portion there, and that is the key portion of deliberation where quorum comes into play. I think also if you read through some of the rulings, what you've seen historically in the past is that you end up accidentally getting into a serial communication in email very quickly and very easily. So that's part of the reason why it is written the way it is. It was one of the things I was going back and forth with her as well on in terms of how restrictive or not restrictive it is. And she was very intent on trying to protect us and make sure we didn't run into any disclosure issues or anything else like that.
Tom, did she talk about, so I think we definitely, only send messages to about, agenda, or not even usually agenda, and it's just about something, like I use an example, when the warrants need to be signed, stuff like that. Does she talk about when if we like send something of more substance to less than a quorum in separate communications? So if you say you had we've got 6 members, and if we sent a message to 2 of them each time about something less than housekeeping, is that considered a violation of open meeting law?
So I'm going to trying to be careful about how I answer that question, Chuck. So not avoiding it, I'm just going to be careful about how I answer it. She was concerned about serial communication, for sure.
Okay.
She was also concerned about discovery. And whether certain records, what it meant to have certain records discovered and how much pain that was and things along those lines. So whether a quorum or not was involved, she was trying to dissuade, I guess the right way to put it would be. Dissuade that kind of action. Easier said than done, but that's where she was.
Okay. Looks like John Parks had his hand raised.
I did. Tom, 2 questions, and I know you did a ton of research, so thank you for all that you put into this. Do we know of any school districts that have a similar policy for social media that we're looking to adopt?
So that's a great first question. There was a recent back and forth conversation on the MSC listserv asking that question. I'm getting a notification that my network quality is poor, so hopefully everybody can still hear me and see me. No answers really came back out of that. However, in my research, I have found that while they may not have a policy, a lot of other school committees have Facebook pages and use them. I think Woburn is an example. They have one. Pentucket, I think, has one. And a few other school committee have their own Facebook page that they use. I follow a lot of those, and what I see posted on them, for example, is agenda items. Woburn or Melrose, one of them recently posted on their Facebook page all the potential cuts that they're going to have to go through as a result of COVID-19, and encourage the community to come to the meeting to discuss those and see what was necessary. So I know that a lot of other communities are using these, although policy, I think, is a little bit less. Nobody came forward with, here's a policy that we have. There's no model policy here, John, if that's the short answer to your question.
So, Tom, when you did that Woburn example, was that a district Facebook page or a school committee Facebook page?
School committee Facebook page.
Okay.
And then Chuck, if you don't mind, I have one other question.
Yeah.
I'm going to feed off my first one, Tom. Do we know of any boards or committees in Reading currently with policies and guidelines? I know the select board is working on one and has been for a while now.
Yeah.
Are there any others in the town of Reading that have anything in place at this point?
No, to my knowledge, there are not. You point out the select board is working on something. Theirs is far more broadly reaching in my read of it. It's looking even at town employees and things along those lines. I purposely stayed away from those. And I know I had early conversations with Vanessa on this last year, and we kind of diverted a little bit from each other in that regard. But I know that she was looking at a lot of policies from other towns that were really focused on how, town employees were using social media. Since that wasn't my intent, and since I didn't have any intent to govern how Ms. Kelly or Dr. Doherty or Dr. Stice or anybody else was using social media, I wasn't intending to go in that direction, and so we didn't continue many conversations along that line.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay.
I have a question, Chuck.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Tom, so it looks like to me that, and I'm just trying to get it in my head. It looks like to me that this would encourage us to only use text messaging for housekeeping type of items, that we wouldn't want to text message anybody with any type of deliberation or discussion on issues. To me, the way I look at it is any type of communication that we do, whether it's written, whether it's electronic, text messages, Facebook, we need to be aware of the quorum factor, and we need to be aware of any type of deliberation over a quorum, right, without it being public. So if I am going to have a discussion with 2 other members of the school committee on an issue, and I'm in a text message with 2 other members, I haven't exceeded my quorum. Is the idea that somebody could take a screenshot of my text message and pass it on to someone else? Because then they'd have to add that into their quorum equation, so to speak. So for me, a verbal communication and a text message should follow the same requirements. I don't know that we want to limit text messaging to just housekeeping items.
So, I mean, that essentially is the same type of question that Sean was asking, right? And, the answer to that question is really discovery. It comes down to discovery. And that's what it comes down to. Text messages are discoverable, if asked for, right? And that's the tricky line to walk. And deliberation one to another, as long as we're not passing quorum, theoretically, yes, we can. And I'm sure it happens all over the place, right? I'm not going to comment on us versus anybody else, but it does, right? Text messages make it. It's just a discovery issue. That's all it comes down to, And to your point, yes, if somebody forwards it on, that's where you get chain serial communication, and that's where you can inadvertently run afoul of OML. And that's what we want to. That's the other part of being careful, is the inadvertently running afoul. So, even with our verbal conversations, we can accidentally do that too. So we all need to be very cautious of that and careful of that, and make sure that we're deliberating here. Now, I think one other thing I will say is, and actually I'll give credit to the CPAC on this. I was surprised at one of our presentations, and maybe Dr. Stice can remember, or Ms. Kelly, because I think they were both there. there was a point raised in one of the CPAC meetings about deliberation and individuals and whatnot. And they did say, for example, that more than a quorum of school committee members could meet with a parent, for example, and discuss an issue, as long as they then brought the deliberation back to a meeting, right? So, you know, so that you're not making a decision in the dark. You bring the deliberation back to the meeting. This is what we heard. This is a discussion. What do you think? Right? The what do you think portion has to come back to the meeting. The fact portion is fact. So that deliberation becomes an interesting thing from that perspective.
Right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Carl.
Sorry, but you're still not allowed to deliberate in more than a quorum at a meeting. If you go to CPAC meeting and you're just listening to something, listening to a presentation, that's one thing. But if you're deliberating, that's something that has to be done in public anyways.
Yeah, but my point was the example that was raised by, I think it was Lisa or Leslie. I want to be true about that, I think, but she was training the CPAC on the role of the CPAC, and one of the questions came up was OML, and you know, she was like, well, does that mean we can't meet with parents? Because one of the role of the CPACs, of course, is to hear from parents and assess them and understand, and the answer was no, you can meet with parents, and you can meet with parents as all four of you, but you can't really deliberate on their case, you know, for lack of a better way to say it. You can't debate, discuss, you know, what should we do, all that kind of fun stuff. You can meet, you can listen, you can understand, but you can't deliberate until you bring it back to the meeting. So I just put up, just for, you know, to make it easy, because people are asking all the different questions, I put up the red line as well to see where things changed. So you can see in this case, text messages and social media postings was added. That, just so everybody's clear, that came from the MASC policy. That is in alignment with MASC. The school committee, all the way through to the dates, this section was down here. The electronic messaging should not be used. That was actually a Colby addition that started down here that we had then agreed to move up here. And then you can see the big change to the way the public record works. And, you know, copies of correspondence shall be kept and printed and retained in central office and all that stuff. So we got rid of that in order to use the email server as the retention schedule for public records. So this allows you to see the differences a little bit better. You can see them side by side.
When Colby inserted that the second sentence in paragraph 1.
This one.
Starting with school committee members.
Yep.
Did she talk about what she defines as committee matters? Because that's,
so
does that mean something that the committee's currently got on an agenda or a upcoming agenda? Or is it anything that falls under the purview of being a school committee member?
The latter. So it's
yeah, I think it's another word for jurisdiction, right?
Yeah, essentially it is what is in our, jurisdiction is a good way to put it, Sean. It's what is in our purview, what is in our coverage, what could come up at a meeting, what is related to school information or actions. You know, one example that's in the documentation from the DOG, I think, was about, you know, a school building, for example, and, you know, people trying to engender support for the school building on social media. That wasn't necessarily on an agenda the next time, but it was coming up soon, and they wanted to have, you know, some support in that regard. So, yeah, it's anything within our jurisdiction is a good way to put it, as Sean says.
And
that's a phrasing used in OML.
Yeah, exactly. That's OML. That's not Colby per se. That's just OML.
So by Colby putting that sentence in there, is that like belt and suspenders, or is that's her recommendation? It's not necessarily the result of recent litigations, or is it?
So what Colby said to me is, and this goes back to my discovery answer, Chuck, she has been involved in cases where discovery requests happened that got messy. When you file a FOIA request, for example, I'm just going to put it out there, some of these things are discoverable. And that's why she's recommending the language as it is. Obviously, that means, we all have to be careful, but we have to be careful anyway. We're bound by OML regardless of what this says. This is just giving us a little bit more guidelines and guardrails around OML, so we don't accidentally get ourselves in trouble.
So if at all in doubt, pick up the phone and call somebody.
You have less chance of running into serial communication accidentally that way, but you have to remember the conversations you've had with everybody and what you can talk about with everybody. Yes.
But correct me if I'm wrong, if two members of the school committee exchange texts on a matter that's under our jurisdiction, and you're saying it's discoverable, but there's no evidence that either of them texted or emailed or electronically communicated with anyone else, then nobody has broken open meeting law, correct?
You were 100% correct in that, Erin.
Okay.
It's really more the concern that Colby had, that
person B goes to person C and...
Well, that person B goes to person C and then C to D. Yes, that is part of the conversation and the trail of text, but also just the pain of going through that discovery process, right? Somebody puts in that request, you have to turn over your phone records, you have to do all this other kind of fun stuff. So that was really what the conversation was around that she was trying to protect us from. So we all just have to, go ahead.
Tom, just to put a fine point on it, I think what we're saying is it's much easier just to be able to honestly and openly say, we didn't have any discussions over electronic means on any matters within the committee's jurisdiction.
Yep, that's as clear as it goes, Sean.
And then you don't have to expose those in discovery because they don't exist.
So that's the first policy. And we kind of hit a lull in the conversation, so I'm going to open up the second policy. Today, we're not voting on approving them, we're just voting on the readings as a motion, right? So this is the first reading, which is our policy. We have two readings, reading one and then reading two. Reading two, it becomes official, and that's what it becomes. So the actual social media policy is here. And you can't see that, but let me switch it over in a second, and we can open that up. And I'm just going to open up the red line version of that too, although it's a bit messy because of all the changes that have happened. So we can go through that as appropriate. Stop, and then share. And the red line version is here. All right, so can everybody see that one?
Yes.
Okay. So the big difference is here. Per the conversation from last fall, I had originally labeled it BHE-SM, SM being for social media, and following the guidance, it's now BHEA. It was slightly rechanged from a naming perspective to be use of social media instead of school committee members' social media policy, and then a few other updates in working through with Colby. We took out the definitions from this section. The definitions are in the procedure protocol documentation. So we have that, but otherwise it's basically just to form the intent, which is a key thing here, forming the intent of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it, to support the district, but make sure that we have effective and accurate communication, and then also to make sure that we are clear that we're going to do it in a way that is in accordance with OML. So it's very, I guess for lack of a better word, say straight, clean to the point, but this is the version as it is right now.
Any comment?
Tom, I'm trying to find it. Where's the bit in here around people up for election?
That's in the procedure document. I'll move to that next after this, Sean.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. That's why I'm not seeing it. Thank you.
Yep. No problem. Yeah, so Colby's recommendation here was to keep this one as clean and as short as possible.
Yeah.
And then all the rest of the protocol procedure, how we actually execute this, is in the procedure documentation.
I mean, the procedures are really in
Yeah.
my mind, the important.
Yep, so I will switch to that now, and we can start going through that and maybe dicing it up. Cancel and share. And I think it's this one. Yep, let me change the sizing so people can see it appropriately. Okay, so you'll note here that some of the definitions got moved in here appropriately. We restate the intent is that we're avoiding private backroom deliberation and deal making, and again using the between or among. It's important to know that a quorum is important in Reading. That's 4 people. One point of note, and I think it's in the research document as well, but just so everybody's on the same page. If for some reason anybody on this committee decides to resign, and we go to a 5-member committee, that does not change our quorum number. Our quorum number is defined by the town charter, which says that we're a 6-member body. So we must have 4 members to have a quorum, regardless of whether we're a 5-member body after resignation or a 4-member body or anything else like that. We have 4 members to have a quorum. One of the key things here is positions or opinions. Be careful about sharing those. It's a suggestion really to refrain from commenting on each other's. You don't want to get into that serial related thing on any of our own pages when it's regarding a topic that is our topic. So obviously if somebody's saying, hey, what I do for the weekend, that doesn't matter. You can comment all you want. You start talking about building schools or, how the education's going or anything else like that, then you want to be careful. We can respond in social media groups, but we have to make sure the intent is right. We're not responding to each other. We're responding to the public. And that goes back to the core understanding of what OML is for. The intent is to communicate. OML is not to stop communication with the public. It's to make sure that communication with each other is in a public fashion appropriately. And then some other guidelines. Don't direct commentary at each other. Don't tag each other in the response. Try not to like or love or care or anything else a response from any one of us, just as a general guideline. And then the meat of the protocol or procedure is here in terms of how we would do it. And this, I think, is where probably the most amount of discussion or debate will come or naturally has come historically. And Sean, this is where your question about up for election comes into play. So in terms of that question, just to address it, the open meeting law does have a carve out for members that are in election seasons to be able to post whatever they want pretty much. And they're not bound by that provision, the OML provisions. As such, my recommendation is that we make sure that they're not potentially in any sort of conflict of interest, and therefore we exclude any members that are in the election season, not in the election year, in the election season. And I tried to bound that by the period of time in which, the certified materials had to be put back until the election itself. That was the intent of that language there. So did you want to ask a clarifying question, Sean, on that?
Yeah. I mean, so I this makes a lot of sense, and I like the way you bounded the period there. I guess my question was, is it your intent Is it your intent that this would only apply to individuals who are actively seeking re-election?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
because of the period after you filed your official paperwork. Now, I suppose somebody could theoretically then start a write-in campaign by not filing official paperwork, and I think we'd have to address that issue at a later point in time. But yes, if they're actively seeking re-election during the election period of time, then they would be pulled out of participation in this policy for us.
And so is this the, when you say the official filing date, my recollection is it's actually a window, right? So it's it opens on such and such a date when Laura gets the forms out, and it has a deadline, some number of weeks before the election or whatever it is. Is the intent that this would, I just want to make sure this is clear. Like, I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I could read it a couple different ways here. Is it intended to be from that deadline? Like, how are you thinking about it?
So my intention was from the day that which all the papers must be returned for you to be eligible to be on the ballot. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the deadline for submitting your signature pages would be when this would kick in. Okay.
Yes.
So theoretically, then I'm just playing out here. Theoretically, somebody who is actively running for re-election submitted their papers a few weeks before the deadline, could, at least according to this procedures document, could still participate in this social committee or social media coordinator role, theoretically.
Theoretically, you raise a very good point. We could change it as part of an edit here that would just say, from the date at which they filed their paperwork, as opposed to the official filing date, or we can leave it as it is. I think.
What about the date that? So there is a date that you can pull out even though you've already turned in your papers, and then there's a cutoff when your name would, even if you decide you don't want to do it, you're still going to end up being on the ballot, and that's a date that comes sometime after you've heard. I can't remember how close it is to the election. Is it 45 days or something?
If I recall from my campaign, and maybe the three new members can remember, I think it's about 3 weeks after the official filing date, and it's about 5 weeks before the election period, the election date.
So 45.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it was about 2 weeks after the deadline, but I don't know, because you could have someone playing off our typical April, first Tuesday in April election. You could have someone filing in January, but the deadline would not be until the middle of February.
Yeah, I mean, in my election year,
that's a long time, and they're campaigning during that time. Like, you start campaigning as soon as you turn in your paperwork.
So we could change this if people want to, and I have no objection to do it from the point at which their paperwork is officially certified, or something else along those lines. Turning it in doesn't mean anything until Laura tells you you're certified, or the town clerk, whoever that is. But right now it's Laura. We could change it to be the date at which you're certified, and you have an obligation to notify the committee that you've been certified for re-election.
That would be my vote for that sentence.
Does anybody have any objections to that terminology? I mean, I can make a change now, and we can then vote on it if necessary.
I think that makes sense.
Well, we're not going to necessarily vote on these anyway. We're voting on the policies, not necessarily the execution.
Right. I'm just trying to make sure I keep the intent of the committee in line appropriately. Any objection to the terminology that Aaron put forward there? I'll just say from the date the candidates. I can spell check that as I need to, right? Candidates paperwork
nomination
Officially.
papers, I think, is the formal.
Okay. Certified by the town clerk. Nomination papers are officially certified by the town clerk.
Or by the office of the town clerk.
Okay, the office of. Okay. Any objection to that?
No, it's good to me.
Oh,
Okay. Any other feedback or commentary on the rest of the protocol as we go through it? There's a lot in there, so.
Tom, I have one more question on that paragraph. Actually, I don't know if it's a paragraph or a clause, or what you want to call it. In the second line there, should that be this procedure versus this policy? I mean, the policy still applies to all of us, regardless of whether or not we're running a campaign, I think.
Yep. That's
Okay.
right. I thought I'd caught all those, but thank you. Good catch, Sean. Thank you.
Sure.
Tom, under number 7 there,
Yep.
for the avoidance of doubt, nothing in this procedure.
How about deleting that too? Prohibits. Okay. Any other feedback or comments?
I guess one other just general question about the intent here. So if we go to the first page of this with the expectations, it says school committee members should generally avoid posting policy positions or opinions concerning topics under their jurisdiction, but rather stick to factual information sharing. I think that this definition of social media or definition of blog could include, you could argue that a campaign website would be included there.
where are you, Sean?
Right here, Chuck.
Yeah, on the first page, the third,
Oh, okay.
yeah, point 3 there. I don't know. I'm struggling with how a campaign would fit into these procedures.
So a campaign, I guess, by technicality would not be in these procedures, right? If you're campaigning. Now, after your campaign is finished, nothing makes you take down your web page is what you've already put up there, or your Facebook profile for your campaign or anything else like that. It's already out there. And I purposely use some vague language here, generally avoid, because we are who we are, right? People are gonna, take positions to a degree, but the best practice is you stick to facts as much as possible. Would be the way I would answer that question, Sean.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, I agree with the premise. I agree with that in normal times. I think it makes a lot of sense. I just, none of us ceases being a school committee member because we're in the thrust of a campaign, right? So I'm just, and I hear what you're saying that it says generally. So, I mean, I guess if we have kind of an understanding that, in the course of conducting a campaign, one of us might express an opinion on something that could be defined as social media, folks are comfortable with that and comfortable that this language allows for that, then I don't have any issues.
Yeah, I guess the way I'm answering that question, just for avoidance of doubt, I guess, as I've used that a few times here, is, when you're in the election campaign, this procedure, you're exempt from it essentially.
Sure. Okay.
Right? So it doesn't, you're not participating on behalf of the school committee, but you're also not bound by it. And OML also gives a candidate running for election a lot of freedom in that period of time when they're running for election.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good catch. Good call.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot here, but I think we've covered a good amount tonight. If there's no other feedback right now, I can make these final changes that we've just agreed to, and we can, put it forward for the second reading whenever that's available. A couple weeks or 3 weeks, as the case may be.
Yeah. Anyone else? Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much for all your work on this, Tom.
My pleasure, no problem.
Absolutely. This is great.
Now everyone can start tweeting away.
When you doodle though.
Yeah. Okay.
I have 7,000 tweets lined up, just ready to hit send, Chuck. I've been waiting for this.
Good meeting tonight. That's everything on the agenda.
How about liaison subcommittee?
And reports, correct. So, Tom, did you?
Chuck,
Yes.
do we have to vote to accept the first reading?
Yes, we do. That's a great catch, Aaron. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not my catch, it was Linda's, but
Well, Linda, thank you. Linda Engelson. She caught us in the.
Sorry, Linda.
I'll read did I read the motion already, or do I forget
You
if I did or
read
not?
the motion. We had the discussion.
No, I didn't read the motion. We just have the discussion. So I'll read the motion just to be sure and cover ourselves. It's move to accept the first reading of policy BHE, use of electronic messaging by school committee members, and policy BHEA, use of social media by school committee members.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Aaron?
aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Thank you. All right. Now we'll go to committee reports. Tom, did you have a report?
I mean, I think we all attended the finance committee, so I don't need to report anything there to this group. If anybody in the public did not watch that meeting, though, there was a good amount of discussion around the budgets for next year. Ultimately, against the budgets that were decided, that were pushed forward, the finance committee agreed to add back the $60,000 for our accounting and HR assistant that we're trying to hire, and I think $53,000, give or take, for the COLA related increases for non-represented personnel. So that was, I think, appreciated by this committee generally across the board. And then the school, in terms of select board, I didn't watch. I looked through some of the materials. I don't think there's anything directly related to us other than the conversation around town meeting, which seems to be evolving into a virtual town meeting as it stands right now.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna. I think it is, John. Correct. It's June 15th.
That is correct.
It's now.
I believe they're going to try to make some accommodations for a small population that would rather be in person. But yeah, it's going to be remote.
Yeah, we got an email. I got an email from Laura Gem of saying that the survey came back that everyone wanted to do virtual. So, The other thing I just add about that finance committee, I was encouraged tonight when I saw Gail's report or presentation and where we are in terms of the budget. So that makes me feel better, especially when a lot of the dialogue at the FinCom meeting was around buying things for COVID-19 expenses. So I feel good that we have that close to $400,000. So anyway, Aaron, did you want to report?
I mean, I've been continuing to attend the weekly CPAC and administrator's phone call, but I don't know that I have anything to add that Maria didn't cover wonderfully tonight in her presentation.
Thank you. Sean?
No report tonight.
Carla?
Yes, thank you. The RCTV the board met on May 19th. I got to meet the entire board. We got an update on studio operations now that they're kind of shut down. They're still covering all government meetings in town. Local church services are being recorded, select board, school committee. They're working with town meeting for that, the coordination of that meeting. They did a live Memorial Day ceremony. Obviously, they did the senior parade, which Dr. Doherty already spoke about how wonderful it was, and it really, really was a wonderful event. And they were talking about summer programming, and they're not even sure what that's going to look like this year until they have more guidelines. So that's a generator, a revenue generator for them, and they're not sure what that's going to look like this year in terms of summer camps and things like that in their facility. So thank you.
John?
Nothing to report, Chuck.
Okay. Dr. Doherty, who's our liaison to I don't have it in front of me, the RCASA?
There is no longer a liaison.
That's right. I'm sorry. Yeah. So we can't, but we can go to those meetings because you had a meeting this week, right? For that?
We did, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Is there a motion?
I'll let somebody else make the motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Come on, somebody's got
a second.
Oh, I thought John seconded. I'll second. Aaron.
I did.
All right, so Sean,
Aye.
Carla,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.